Oh, yeah, that's it. It's 7:31. So we'll start the meeting. I'd like to welcome members, officers and members of the public to this meeting of the council. Before the meeting starts, I would like to invite the committee member and scrutiny officer, Chanel Wickenden, to update you on the systems being used and to confirm that officers in remote attendance are present.
Thank you. Can I just confirm that the officers in remote are able to hear us and we can hear them? Steve Cobb?
Yes, present.
Thank you very much. Is there any other officers online? Thank you. I'll move to the rules of debate. If a member wishes to speak, they should use the speak button located on the microphone unit. The microphone will light up green and the chair will be alerted of your request to speak. When the chair invites you to speak, your microphone will be made live and will turn red, at which point you can speak. The normal procedure rules in respect of debate and times to speak will apply. Voting. When requested to vote, voting will be via the yes, no, abstain buttons on your microphone unit. Details of how members voted will be shown on the screens around the room and the result will be visible on the YouTube stream. In the event of a tied vote, the chair will have the casting vote. Are there any questions before we start the meeting? I'll hand back to the chair.
Apologies for absence. I've received apologies for absence from councillors David Chalmers, Elizabeth Dennis, Lisa Nash, Tamsin Thomas and Joe Graziano. Are there any further apologies? Okay. I would like to propose that we take as read and approve as a true record the minutes of the meeting of council held on the 19th of September 2024. Can I have a seconder? Daniel Allen.
Happy to second, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any comments on the minutes? No. Okay. Can we vote then?
Chair, the motion's carried.
Thank you. Notification of other business. There is none. Chair's announcements. In accordance with council policy, this meeting is recorded. The recordings will be available on both the council's YouTube page as well as the council's ModGov site, alongside the documentation from the meeting. Members are reminded that this council has declared both a climate emergency and an ecological emergency. These are serious decisions and mean that as these are emergencies, all of us officers and members have that in mind when we carry out our various roles and tasks for the benefit of our district. More details are included on the agenda front sheet. Declarations of interest. Members are reminded to make declarations of interest before an item. The detailed reminder about this and speaking rights is set out under the chair's announcements on the agenda.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I just want to state the obvious, which is obviously the GA2 site was approved in the council's local plan. We do have, as a council, an interest in a very small strip of the land in the GA2 allocation. So effectively that means that as councillors, you have an interest in the site. So any of the determinations at various meetings that we have in relation to project boards, cabinet, consideration of master plan design codes and the planning applications. However, it would not make it practical for us to deal with this matter without a dispensation. So I consider this matter, it was in September, and I have issued all members with a dispensation so that you can deal with all such matters appropriately. That does not mean that covers any other interest. It's just in relation to this specific interest in the site. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Rules of debate. Can I remind you that normal procedure rules in respect of debate and times to speak will apply. No speeches may be made after the mover has moved a motion and explained the purposes of the motion. of it until the motion has been seconded. When seconding a motion or amendment, a member may reserve their speech until later in the debate. In accordance with the Constitution, please can members ensure that no speech exceeds 5 minutes without the consent of the chair. Comfort break. This evening, we have items on the agenda which refer to strategic planning matters. For the purposes of clarification, in order to vote on these agenda items, a member must be present for the entirety of the debate and consideration of those items. If a member leaves the room at any point during these items, they will not be able to vote. This applies to agenda items 9 and 10 and the corresponding referrals 8B and 8C to be heard alongside those items. For all other business on the agenda, a member may leave the room during the debate and consideration of that item and be able to vote. However, please be mindful of the business on the agenda and wherever possible, leave at an appropriate point in the proceedings. If the meeting goes on at length, I will pause for a comfort break at a suitable time. Change to the agenda. Being mindful of the volume of items on the agenda, the significant time that these will take, and as there are members of the public wishing to speak, I've agreed to the following changes in the order of the published agenda. Public participation will now be immediately before the retrospective agenda items 9 and 10. Questions from members, agenda item 6, and the 3 motions received in accordance with Standing Order 4.8.12, agenda item 7, will follow agenda item 11. The motion received in accordance with Standing Order 4.815 will be considered immediately following the chair's announcements. Referral item 8B will be taken with agenda item 9. Referral item 8C will be considered with agenda item 10 if the motion similar to one previously rejected is passed. Referral 8A will be taken after the reordered item 10. Following the resignation of Chris Hinchcliffe, a by-election was held in Royston Palace Ward in October, and I'm glad to welcome new councillor Sarah Lucas for her first council meeting. Chair's Civic Event and Award Ceremony 2025. My civic event and the award ceremony will take place at Hitchin Town Hall on Friday the 28th of February next year. The event is raising money for my chosen charity, SANS. Members will have received an email this week with details on how you can purchase tickets, and I hope to welcome as many of you as possible to the event. The donation of raffle prizes would be greatly appreciated, and if you have any raffle prizes, donate, or if you know of any companies who may wish to donate, please contact committee services or chair's secretary. It's with great sadness that I announce that former chair of North Herts Council, Ray Bloxham, passed away on Wednesday, the 6th of November. Former councillor Ray Bloxham represented Letchworth-Wilbury Ward from 1976 till 1989. He also served as vice chair from 1979 to 1980 and chair from 1980 to 1981. He served on several committees such as Housing Services, Environmental Health and Control, and Recreation and Amenities. He also was extremely active in the community, representing several outside bodies, including Letchworth Community Trust, Community Health Council for North Hertfordshire, Letchworth Adult Educational Settlement and Hertfordshire Housing Consortium. Our thoughts are with former councillor Simon Bloxham and his family at this sad and difficult time. I believe Councillor Munzer would like to say a few words.
Thank you, Chair. Rainer Desmond Bloxham passed away on the 6th of November 2024. He was born on the 6th of April 1936 in Stoke Godling, a small village on the Leicestershire-Warwick borders. After a few years working, he conducted 2 years of national service, completing this in a military police camp, but on the right side rather than inside. He met his wife Olive in North Wales in 1957, and they married a year later. Ray had 2 children, Beverly and Simon, and 2 grandchildren, Charlotte and Corey. Ray and his family moved to Letchworth Garden City in 1966, where he settled into Letchworth life, attending and taking part in a very active part in the local Methodist church in Pixmoor Way. He worked at Fairfield Hospital for many years, moving on to Bedford General Hospital before taking up a position as regional manager in North for Methodist care homes. One of his proudest achievements whilst at Methodist Homes was working with Professor Tim Kitwood of Bradford and Stirling Universities, researching improved ways of caring for patients with dementia. As part of this work, in 2000, Ray commissioned and opened the country's first dementia care home, designed specifically to better care for people with dementia. Whilst in Letchworth, Ray became interested in local politics and was elected to North Herts District Council in 1974, becoming its chairman in 1980. He worked on several committees of the council favouring planning and housing, which he took a keen interest in chairing both. During his time on the council, Ray and Olive were privileged to meet the Queen on several occasions, the highlight being when Ray accompanied the Queen and Prince Philip around the new North Herts Leisure Centre when she opened it in 1982. When Ray moved up north, he began involved in politics, serving as a councillor, deputy leader of the council, and mayor of Carlisle. Ray suffered with disease that slowly took away many of the abilities we take for granted. The first to go was his ability to speak, which was such a shame as he spent all of his life advocating for others. If he were alive today and able to speak, he would say that he holds North Hertfordshire Council in high regard and of course misses friends on all sides of the chamber, especially Keith Emersall, Jeff Woods, Judy Billing and Anthony Burrows, all of whom have recently passed. Ray also served his community as a magistrate for many years on the bench and also worked as a Samaritan in his spare time. And I'm sure that I speak for all of us when I say to Simon and his family, you have our deepest condolences at this very difficult time, and to thank your father for the many years of service he gave to the residents of North Hertfordshire.
The other councillors who would like to say anything? I'm sure all members wish to join me in passing our thoughts at this time to their families and friends and request that you join me in. Oh, sorry. Again, it's with great sadness I announce that former chair of North Herts Council, Anthony Burrows, has passed away. Former councillor Burrows represented Letchworth Central and William from 1976 to 79 and Letchworth South West from 1979 to 1990. He also served as vice chair from 86 to 87 and chair from 87 to 88. In addition, he served on several committees, including Highways and Transport, Development Services, Environmental Services and Housing Services. He also was active in the community, representing multiple outside bodies such as the Education Advisory Committee for Letchworth, Life Care and Housing Trust, North Herts Community Health Council, and the Education Advisory Committee for Letchworth and Baldock. Our thoughts are with former councillor Burrows' family and friends at this sad and difficult time. Councillor Muncer.
Thank you. I was very, very sad to hear of the death of former councillor Burrows. Although I didn't know him personally, I know that he had a big impact on the Conservatives here in North Hertfordshire and also the people of Letchworth, and our thoughts are very much with his family and friends at this difficult time.
Councillor Daniel Allen.
Thank you. As North Hertfordshire District Council, we'd like to thank Anthony and Ray for their dedication to the district and to Letchworth Garden City in particular. We offer our deepest condolences and sympathies to their families and loved ones. Their legacy remains a part of our council's history, as you can see on the walls of this chamber.
I'm sure that members wish to join me in passing our thoughts at this time onto their families and friends. I request that you join me in a minute's silence in remembrance. Next item, I believe councillor Barnard would like to say a few words.
Thank you, Chair. Unfortunately, it's a bad way to start a meeting, isn't it? Because I'd like to speak a little bit on behalf of the widow of Michael Weeks, who was obviously a councillor here for 22 years and served in Baldock and across the district, of course. His charity was SANDS, and at his funeral, a sum of money was raised, and I think it was passed on to probably the last chairman. I'm not sure, but it was certainly passed on to the council. There was a residue. That residue has now been passed to me, and if I could pass it to you to put to your charity, I know that the Weeks family will be very happy.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, notice of motions received under Standing Order 4.8.15. As I've explained, we will now consider the one motion received in accordance with this standing order. This relates to the previous council decision on the Stevenage Master Plan. Can I invite Councillor Daniel Allen to move the motion?
Thank you, Chair. My apologies, I didn't realise I was moving this motion. Please give me one moment. Thank you. Thank you very much. Following motion has been submitted to consider a motion previously rejected due to notice of which has been given in accordance with Standing Order 4.8.15b. In accordance with paragraph 4.8.15b of the Council Constitution, we, the undersigned 12 members, support the following motion being considered by full council at its meeting on the 28th of November 24. That full council considers a report and recommendation on the North of Stevenage Master Plan at its meeting of the 28th of November, following recommendations by the project board. It is noted that land to the north of Stevenage is allocated for development in the council's local plan, NS1 policy SP16, a strategic site. The council's adopted local plan policies require preparation of such a master plan. The motion of 11th of July 2024 was lost as per the debate, on the basis that there would be further examinations by the council's local plan project board of issues raised during debate. Project Board have considered these matters and therefore the master plan has been referred for approval. There is no reason to delay reconsideration of this matter by full council. Therefore, the council resolves to consider any similar referral motion from Cabinet, and we have 12 signatures.
Can I invite one of the 12 members that signed to second the motion? Thank you. Stuart put his hand up. Can we move to debate? Councillor Bryant.
Thank you. It may not seem to have been very long ago since we last discussed this motion, but it was felt that it is such an important thing for us to look again at the master plan as soon as possible. And so we looked in detail at the aspects of the master plan which were thought to be missing or fell short. These have been worked on. There have been meetings with the developers. There have been meetings with the strategy group. And so we'd like this to be debated again today. Thank you.
Thank you, Val. Any other points for discussion? No. Can we move? Oh, Councillor Munter.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points to make before we decide how to proceed with this matter. Obviously, we discussed this matter at great length during our meeting in September, and a number of concerns were raised. And it's very good to see that CrowdAce and the developers have come back now to address those concerns and provide some clarification to those matters. In that September meeting, Councillor Brown highlighted the point that we suffer here as this is half a development, and she is incredibly right to highlight that point. And what I sincerely hope is that moving forward, as we start to grant permission to the strategic sites contained within the local plan, we have more cross-border working. Because unfortunately, the decisions taken by Stevenage Borough Council have somewhat tied our hands when dealing with this application.
Sorry, can I stop you there? We're talking about the motion.
Oh,
So-
forgive me, I thought we were talking about the
No.
substance of the motion.
No.
In that case, forgive me, please accept my sincere apologies.
We'll wait for that speech. If there's no comments on the motion, can we move to the vote?
Chair, the motion's carried.
Okay, on to item 9, which is the land northeast of Great Ashby, GA2. We are joined tonight by Ms. Gruner, Mr. Lofaro, and Mr. Kima, who will be providing a presentation for members regarding the land north of Great Ashby Strategic Master Plan Framework. Can I invite Ms. Gruner to start the 5-minute presentation to members? Yeah.
Sorry. So for the GA2 item, I would like to declare that I have a family member, namely my brother-in-law, who works for a company who was engaged to prepare the master plan. But this was prior to his employment, and he was not specifically involved in the preparation of this master plan, nor has he had any involvement in it. I have an open mind on the item, and I've sought advice from the monitoring officer, who has advised that I can participate in this item.
Stuart Willoughby.
Yes, he's my son-in-law, so I make the same declaration of interest, and also say that I have an open mind on this subject.
Thank you. Any other points about that before we ask Ms. Gruner to start the 5-minute presentation to members?
Thank you, ma'am. It's exciting to be here tonight on the evening of the master plan's presentation to the full council. Tonight completes almost 10 years of the local plan process and is a key stepping stone on the path to outline planning permission. This development will deliver a high-quality residential neighbourhood of at least 600 homes, approximately 250 of them affordable, with new community and education facilities which will serve both new and existing residents of Great Ashby. The scheme has been conceived as a landscape-led development, immersed within attractive woodland and designed around ecology corridors connecting with the surrounding natural environment, thereby delivering an attractive edge to the built settlement and forming a gateway to the countryside. During the preceding committee meeting, some members were kind enough to describe this master plan as excellent. This indeed reflects the huge effort that our multidisciplinary team has devoted to its preparation and the collaborative nature of our dealings with your offices and the Planning Project Board, whose input we have hugely valued. We continue to work with your development management team through the pre-application process as we look forward to agreeing with them the form of an outline planning application to be submitted in the early months of 2025. This outline planning application will further develop the master plan and, together with the accompanying environmental impact assessment, address environmental issues in greater detail, along with housing mix, density parameters, and some main design principles. The active travel and public transport routes have been carefully audited, and a detailed sustainable transport strategy is being identified to ensure that links with the neighbourhood and beyond will be convenient for walking and cycling. An improved bridleway network is also being discussed. Traffic impact has always been the subject of extensive modelling and assessment work in joint coordination with the Highway Authority and Hertfordshire County Council. The construction management plan will address construction traffic management and matters such as dust and noise during construction to minimise impacts on the existing residents of Great Ashby. We welcome the opportunity to continue close cooperation with local community groups and indeed with the NHS to ensure that families living in this new community not only have access to a primary school on site, but also benefit from other essential community facilities in line with practical requirements. Looking ahead, once planning consent has been granted, Picture Estates is planning to bring in a construction partner to implement the vision and the framework set out in the master plan and the subsequent planning application. From that point, we expect construction of the key infrastructure to serve the development to take place, and then housing delivery to run in the order of 150 to 200 homes a year, envisaging an overall development period of 5 years. I would be very happy to answer any questions that you may have. In this, our planning consultant, Edward Keemer, behind me here, who has over 40 years experience in promoting all phases of Great Ashby, will assist me in answering questions, as will Emanuela Lofaro, joining me here, who represents Picture Estates. Thank you for your time and giving us this opportunity to answer questions and assist with your debate. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Can I remind people that this will be your only opportunity to ask questions of our guests here tonight? So can you make sure that you ask all the questions that you need now, rather than coming up with something during the debate? Are there any questions? I have a few. Councillor Allen.
Thank you very much.
Daniel.
May I ask about cycle access onto the Stevenage cycle network from Great Ashby 2, and how cycling will be included out of the development, please?
Yes, thank you. So there is an existing bridleway within the south of the site, and that leads onto a cycleway. So that will be one of the points of access for Easy Cycle. The access proposal that we are connecting onto Mendip Way has a dedicated separate cycleway and separate footway. So that will link the new homes to the existing cycle infrastructure within Great Ashby and then wider Stevenage area. We are also incorporating a further, call it an active travel link. So it's a cycle link, and that will be between the existing Great Ashby community and the new primary school. And that is specifically to allow easy access from the GA1 development. Within the site as well, we're having dedicated separate cycle routes and footways, as well as shared cycle and footway network, so that it is very easy to connect and convenient to connect into the Stevenage network.
Councillor Munter.
I have a few questions, if I may, Chair. The first one relates to community involvement, community engagement. When designing this master plan, what engagement have you had with the community, with the Great Ashby Community Council, in order to actually alleviate and attempt to mitigate some of the concerns that they have surrounding the impact of this master plan on their community?
So we had a meeting with members from the Community Council in the community hall in Great Ashby, where we answered some of their questions and also went away and produced some further information and sent them some further information. We have shared our findings of our reports with them in the meantime. And we have our engagement team has been in constant contact with them, trying to answer their questions and consider what their concerns were, and if and how we can alleviate or try to work towards finding a solution. Some of their concerns related to elements such as NHS provision, which is unfortunately outside of our remit. And while we can provide a community hall which could potentially include surgery space or pharmacy space or something like that, we're not in the position to insist that a GP surgery is incorporated there. Further concerns were raised about the potential access onto Back Lane. So there is no vehicular access onto Back Lane. There is an emergency vehicular access. So if at any stage the main road is closed due to an accident, there is the opportunity for fire service or ambulance to enter the site via an alternative route. So no vehicular access onto Back Lane. Concerns have been raised by the single point of access into the site off Mendip Way. This site is an allocated site, and it has always been promoted with that single point of access. Now, that has been scrutinised through the allocation process and the local plan process. As I've said now, we have been working with Herts County Council, North Herts Council and the Highway Authority in doing all the studies and proving that the access is safe and it is capable of accommodating the expected vehicular use. We continue to be in consultation and keep sending updates and answering emails that we do receive from Great Ashby Council. Just a further one on that, we have also been in direct contact with the Herts Badger Group, who we have also met and who we are meeting again soon to hear their concerns and their design ideas, and again to explain our scheme to them.
Would I just be able to focus a little bit on what you said about healthcare? Because I appreciate that you're not the NHS, you're not the group of whom commissions primary healthcare in communities. Would you mind informing council about the discussions that you've had with the local NHS about healthcare in the community and what the fruit of those discussions have been? We are starting those discussions now. So what we've done is previous studies have shown that I think there is a requirement for some healthcare facility due to all the new allocations, but the exact location of where that is not discussed and not known. We have therefore kept an open mind on what could be provided within a facility. But now, as part of the application process, we are able to discuss with the NHS, and we have emailed them our latest plans to start those discussions.
Councillor Tom Tyson.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, I think you've touched upon both of the questions that I was going to ask, which were about the single point of access. And when you came to Project Board last month, you said, or it was said that you were still in negotiations with Hertfordshire Highways to discuss the sort of exact arrangements for the access. And I just wondered if you got any updates on what progress had been made in that respect. And also, you mentioned the computer modelling just now again, and I wondered if you could just flesh that out a little bit with some details of what the results of that modelling showed.
Yes, I can, in as far as I understand it. The matters of access design were matters of very much detailed. It is things like, can you increase this radius and can you move this bit of this road slightly here, slightly further south? They are not matters of substance. We have been working with them, and we are now at the stage where we can send them what we think is the final plan. An additional meeting was held with the officers in the meantime, since we've had our previous meeting with you. So that is ongoing, but it seems that the exact geometry of that junction is now agreed. Do you mind reminding me of your second part of your question, please?
It was about the computer modelling of the traffic movements and capacity to accept all that traffic.
So the computer model is provided by the Highway Agency, and that plugs in the information from existing highway movements, from surveys which are done at junctions and lines which are lined across the road. And that also takes into account growth. So it takes into account the other allocated sites, any other permitted developments within the wider network, not just within North Herts, not just within Stevenage. And then that estimates and says where most journeys will be to, which directions, how much capacity the roads and the junctions will have, what queue times will increase by, and all kinds of elements like that. That is then fed into a transport assessment where you say, yes, this junction can cope with additional capacity, or no, we need to make changes to this crossing point because the cars wait too long and people can't cross quick enough. So that is where that feeds into.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask about the bus loop and at what stage you expect the bus services to start following the initial construction.
So we've been constantly in discussions with the bus companies. We are proposing and designing for a bus at phase 1. So our primary school and our community centre will form part of phase 1 of the development. We're designing a bus in and out loop. So the bus will enter the site towards the primary school, turn around at the primary school and exit again. And that is what we're currently planning for. And then phase 2 and 3, it will start leading through the wider parts of the site.
Just to follow up, can I just to clarify then? So the bus services will begin before people start moving in.
It's unlikely it'll be before people start moving in, but it will be during phase 1. So it will be at, let's say, the completion of X amount of homes. So probably once the primary school is there. So it's something that we will agree through the Section 106 exactly when that is. But all our plans so far are working that it is part of the first phase, and we're specifically designing for that.
Councillor Williams.
Yeah, I wanted to ask a couple of questions as well. So I wanted to go back to Councillor Allen's question about the cycleway. So you talked about the cycleway provision in the new development. Great Ashby doesn't currently connect to the Stevenage network. It's got a missing part. So what's going to be done to upgrade so that actually the new development connects through and the existing residents have got that provision as well?
So the transport study includes an accessibility study, audit, and that looks at the existing links and identifies areas where it's too narrow for bicycles, or where there's overgrown plants which can be cleared, or where there's bits of paving missing or anything like that. And those, I think there's 4 cycle areas and 4 pedestrian areas that have been identified for potential improvements. That again will be secured as part of a Section 106, not 106, but it will be secured as part of the planning application to actually upgrade those sections of path or cycleway or whatever. So that is one way in which changes are being made outside of the site to facilitate cycle access.
Councillor Jarvis.
Thank you. Two questions. I was going to ask about the connection about potential off-site improvements to cycle and walking routes, but we've just heard the answer to that. But my first question is, are there any off-site highway improvements that you're proposing as part of this plan? And the second relates to the emergency access and what measures you would envisage to ensure that inappropriate use of the emergency access did not take place.
So at this stage, the modelling has shown that no junction improvements are needed, so nothing in terms of vehicular improvement off-site. What is happening is improvements to pedestrian and cycle networks off-site, so crossing points and things like that. So no vehicular junctions are being proposed to be upgraded, in line with the Highway Authority's guidance and principles on that at this stage. In terms of emergency access, that is envisaged to be bollard controlled. So a bollard which will only allow certain vehicles through, and pedestrians, horses and cyclists, but not other vehicles.
Councillor Pupala-Singham.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just have a couple of questions as well, and one just follow up on that point. So you allude to the point that there's no improvements needed for offsite, but that's predicated and mentioned in the report. That's because you assume that active travel will underpin this development, correct?
That is part of the assumptions that go into the council's own model and the Highway Authority's own model on how that will work. But yes, it has shown that the junctions are capable of accommodating the additional vehicles and still remain safe and acceptable. And again, that is something that is being tested through the environmental impact assessment, where all the workings are shown as well, and the model is available for everybody to see. And the council have seen the preliminary results of that and the highway authorities, and they are still content that the best way to mitigate any impacts on the highway network is via increasing pedestrian and cycle accessibility off-site.
Okay, thank you. So there's empirical support for that proposition in the reports and
yes, so the studies actually show that as well.
What then would happen then if the proposed active travel assumptions are not borne out in reality? Would that still then, would you agree then that actually the current assumptions that the road network is capable would not then be viable, and it wouldn't be able to sustain the GA2 increase?
That is a potential, but of course the models are used by many different councils. They take lots of evidence into consideration. They take surveys into consideration. So of course anything can... Exactly, that's like Emanuela says, there are buffers in terms of tolerances as well. So lots of things go into these models, but of course if there is a major change to the way that people move in terms of not walking or cycling or taking a bus, then that model might be out of date and not reflect results. But this model is also kept up to date, so it's constantly refreshed with new information. So yes, that's all I can answer. Of course, that is an option, just as the rainfall could dramatically increase and the microclimate on site could increase. So
thanks. And could you assist me with the basis of those models? I'm not aware of them. Is that just predicated on GA2, or does that account for existing Great Ashby as well as the addition of GA2?
No,
sure.
Sorry, completely.
No, that was the question.
No, so the models they're they're very complicated pieces of kit, which takes into account census data, all kinds of surveys. So it's GA2, Stevenage, the allocations within both Stevenage and North Hertfordshire, as well as GA2. So it takes all of that into consideration, as well as what it thinks future trends are, and where these people are going to work and where they'd want to go, what time they might want to drive somewhere.
I ask because I'm sure conversations like this were also held when Great Ashby was made initially. And as we see today, those assumptions were clearly incorrect, if anyone who has spent any time in Great Ashby can attest to. But thank you for responding to that. Could I just ask you about community facilities as well?
Yes, you may.
Because I know on page 58, there's indicated that the retail provision that was initially indicated that was going to be included was no longer now required. Could you just potentially, if you know, could you elaborate why that's been the refinement to that, and why no additional provision is needed, even though there's now additional households coming in potentially?
Yes, so we have looked at that, and of course the existing Great Ashby Neighbourhood Centre has got a local shop that is within an easy cycle from the site and within a short walking distance from many of the new homes within the site. The demand would not be there to serve 600 dwellings with a new shop. No shopkeeper would take that up because it would not be financially viable for them to serve such a small community when there is an existing viable service nearby. That said, we have kept the use of a community facility flexible. So if somebody were to say, I'd like to open a coffee shop here, or I would like to have a hairdressing unit here, that is something that could definitely be accommodated within a building such as that, or within a facility such as that.
Okay, Councillor Ward.
Thank you for outlining the process you went through previously with the community groups, the public and the community council. Can you just summarise what actually changed in your proposals as a result of that consultation?
Yes. So in terms of the public consultation, they were more points of detail. So it was more somebody saying that actually this path is not in the right place, or actually this area is private and it's not within your site. So it was more clarifications about things like that. It was again comments around phasing, which was discussed. So if the primary school is there, it should be there in the first phase and things like that. I think more changes have come about because of discussion with the Badger Group in terms of incorporating wider buffers, incorporating additional, we're calling them pinch points, but sort of traffic calming measures to ensure safe crossing. Unfortunately, like I said, large parts of the consultation with the community council and indeed the public related to the single point of access and general lack of service provision within not just North Hertfordshire and Stevenage, but the UK as a whole, such as NHS provision.
Thank you. So in some ways, it's either mostly things you can't affect or things at the detailed design stage, not this stage.
Yes, there was a couple of clarifications, which was like, okay, yes, you have you know, you're absolutely correct. This is a private path. This isn't. This is where that boundary is. Yes, you're correct. No, this house faces that way. Things like that, which I think probably just helps us in refining our design, gives us further background information. But yes, further detail like that will be taken into consideration as we move forward into reserved matters, well, into outline and then reserved matters.
Thank you.
Councillor Williams again.
So you've mentioned 600 homes being built, and you talked in the highways access plan that considers, the modelling considers all the movement, additional developments and things. The reality of this is that we're actually building 2 developments off of 1 access road here, so it's 900 homes. Okay, so that's in the modelling for the roads. We get that. I'm not hearing you saying that for the other services and other provision, and I wonder why these developments are not being considered together, because they're going to have significant impact. More homes, 900 homes, are going to use access roads that are currently used by only 600 homes, which is incredibly significant. And so I think the community wonders why these are not being considered together. But the question I want to ask you is, what is happening with the land that's west of Mendip Way, which is currently disused and could be used to mitigate the loss of parking, the loss of green space, the loss of the congestion on the road, which the bus route is going to create? What's happening with that bit of land that could be used to make sure that the losses that the existing residents are going to incur?
Thank you, ma'am. We can only develop and design land that we control. That land is outside of our control. We know that the council want to speak to landowners there and see whether there are solutions to at least increase the green infrastructure or create additional links. We can facilitate anything that might come forward and how that could link to our site, but it is out of our control, and we cannot decide as developers and private planning consultants what happens on that land. So that is, I think, something maybe for a local plan to look at.
Sorry if I may integrate. As far as I'm aware, there's joint thinking on the bus provision, for example, that will serve both schemes, GA1 and GA2, and also on the NHS future service. There will be joint coordination in terms of finding a location that suits the entire north of Stevenage growth.
Yeah, so that bus provision will require the removal of verges, potentially, certainly the removal of parking, because the modelling was incorrect 20 years ago when the first bit of Great Ashby was built along Mendip Way. I appreciate that the land is not currently within the parcel. However, we've got an empty bit of land sitting there, which, and it's not unprecedented that a bus route runs down land that's not used for cars. I'm thinking about North Stevenage that we're going to talk about tonight as well. I just think it's very problematic, the amount of disruption that you're going to cause to existing residents by taking away parts of what they already have when there's empty land sitting there.
Yes, your highway officers are here and can listen in, and that is probably something that should be brought up with them. Like I say, at this stage, we're doing what we can, and it's beyond what we're able to do. That doesn't mean that that shouldn't be something that you continue to fight for and that we couldn't aid in that. But at this stage, it is not something that we are able to influence.
Councillor,
sorry, add one thing to one small comment to this on the parking provision that might be also affected by the bus service. We are actually working on a specific on specific surveys of the parking areas and the existing use of the parking areas, and we are actually assessing how the traffic restrictions arising from the bus service will affect parking areas and try to identify new spaces for displaced cars. So that will be part of the future planning submission.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you. So there's been a lot of talk about the computer modelling and the fact that the current development at Great Ashby, it turned out to be wrong. And I'll talk about this single point of access. So my question is, what modal shift are you going to need to achieve what your objective? Because it seems like this, the viability of a single access, the sort of acceptability of it, is predicated on pedestrian and cycle and a modal shift to that. So what modal shift are you targeting?
Yes, the single point of access is not predicated on the modal shift. The single point of access has been part of the local plan since forever, since the site has been promoted, and that's been considered at local plan stage. But I think nationally, internationally, there's a drive towards a modal shift to say that you cannot just jump into your car and drive somewhere. There is elements that we're doing, such as the bus service, which aims to help that modal shift. But yes, of course, people will do what they want to do. They will do what is most convenient to them, and few people will go with their conscience and say, well, actually, I'm not going to get into my car. That is changing with younger generations. And also, if facilities are close and you can walk and cycle to them, then you are more likely to do that. This is also both local and national policy to actually make it slightly difficult for you to drive. It's trying to increase the opportunities, but it's a carrot and stick approach. If you're saying I'm stuck in traffic for 20 minutes just trying to get to the primary school's a 15-minute walk away. Why don't you walk instead? So there is a little bit of a carrot and stick. We cannot know whether the modelling will be right. It is a model. Of course, it might change. But this single point of access is something that's been there for a very long time. It's something that's been considered for a very long time. And if it was acceptable 5 years ago when things started looking at it, and now we're talking about modal shift a lot more in the last 5 years. We have Active Travel England as a department. And even at that stage, a single point of access was acceptable. Then there's a very high likelihood that it will continue to be acceptable.
Councillor Pupler-Singer.
Thanks, Chair. Your colleague just mentioned that you're taking part in surveys to assess the parking capacity along Mendip Way to potentially deal with some of those comments that you were hearing from the community when you consulted. Can I just ask, there's lots of details about the bus loop within the GA2 site in the report. Why then is the bus loop being directed via Mendip Way and not via Great Ashby Way? Because that would alleviate all of those concerns from the community.
So
it might be somewhere there and I've just missed it.
No. That is in the last week, we've received an email from the bus company saying that actually they have a new preferred route, which will go via Great Ashby Way, up Mendip, into the site, around the site and back out again. But we have to consider and design for all eventualities, because that is something that is considered in more detail as the scheme develops. They're an outside party that we can aid in delivering bus services. But at the end, it is also up to them to say where their preferred route is and what the best route is for them. So like I say, just this week, they were saying that actually they think GA2 should be served by a new service, which runs from Great Ashby up Mendip Way into the site immediately. So not going around the whole loop of Mendip Way.
This was actually County Highways, not the bus operator.
Oh, so sorry, this was County Highways saying that as opposed to the bus operator. So,
Councillor Munster.
Thank you. I just want to delve into a little bit more detail, flesh out the point that Councillor Williams was raising, which was a good point indeed. The fact is that within sort of quite a close proximity, if all of these master plans do go through, in the next decade, we can expect to see, over 2,000 homes being built in this community. I understand that you're not responsible for producing the master plan relating to GA1 and NS1, but would you mind informing council what work you have been doing collaboratively with these other organisations who are producing the master plan in all these master plans in order to, effectively mitigate all of the issues of which are going to arise?
So that's exactly what we've been saying, is that we have been working with especially GA1 in looking at things like bus provision, existing parking provision. And then what we have also done is try to specifically alleviate and provide links to our site. So we suspect that people from GA1 might want to come to our local centre or our community centre, use our allotments and go to our primary school. And that's why we've designed a direct link to allow people to move there easily without having to get into their cars. So we are working collaboratively in what we can do. And for what we can't do anything for, we have to, there's no way of predicting the future except through models. We give those models the best information we have, and it gets tested. Often it gets tested at public inquiries. It gets tested as part of development consent orders by even the Secretary of State. So these are not some models that we just drew on a piece of paper somewhere. We have to give it the best information that we have, and we have to trust that that is the correct answer, because there's no other way of predicting and designing a solution.
Councillor Jarvis.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify the position on the buses, because earlier on you said that you were working to produce bus routes that would deal with the total growth in the area of Great Ashby. And clearly one of the problems with doing that is that it requires the removal of parking in existing parts of Great Ashby in order to deliver that. But then you said that the bus might not go that way. So that seems not to deal with the whole issue, but only to deal with your issue. So there is, maybe I've misunderstood, but those things seem inconsistent.
If
to
I
deal
may
with both
answer-
of them, you need to remove the parking, don't you?
If I may answer that, at this stage, we're at the master planning stage. So we're looking at, we're willing to provide a bus. We've designed for a bus to be able to be incorporated within our development. Since we've developed the master plan, we have started intense pre-application discussions with all the departments involved. And it's not been decided yet exactly which route the bus will run. So what we're doing is we're preparing for all eventualities. So we're checking option A and what would the effect be of option A. We're looking at option B and saying, would that maybe be a quicker route, and would that maybe be more convenient for the buses? So at this stage, we don't have a firm proposal for buses outside of the site. We are looking at many options, and that is why I say, if it goes further in Mendip Way, there might be some more effects on parking. If it doesn't go as far into Mendip Way, there might be less effects on parking. And the bus route might be shorter and quicker, but it might not go to GA1, and that might be a different bus. So that is something that's still fluid and still working on. And it's not part of the master plan at this stage. That is something that we continue working on with all parties involved and will continue to evolve.
Councillor Pupla-Singham.
Thanks, Chair. Just a point going back to consultation with the community. I was just curious if you could assist with who you thought, or Senior Group and Phoenix Estates thought, were relevant members of the community to consult, and why potentially the elected representatives for Great Ashby, namely myself and Councillor Williams, were not contacted.
I cannot confirm whether you would try to be contacted or not, or why you were not contacted. Our engagement team sends messages to lots of councillors, and I wonder whether, because this is actually in Western Parish, whether it was maybe Western Parish councillors which were invited, but the Great Ashby Community Council were definitely invited. I cannot give you an answer. We did contact a lot of councillors, and I can check on that for you, but I can honestly not say why you specifically were not contacted. This was also obviously advertised locally and on websites, and leaflets sent out to all houses in the Great Ashby area. So I think we've had a website running as well. So while you might not have been personally contacted, I think there would have been other ways in which you would have been aware of the consultation happening.
Could I just say thank you in that respect to the officers in this authority, and particularly to Nigel Smith, our strategic planning manager, who has done nothing but be proactive in ensuring that both myself and Councillor Williams have been updated on these proposals since the moment we were elected earlier this summer. So very thankful to him for that.
Councillor Collins.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to pick up something that was said earlier. I want to go back to the access, because I think Councillor Brown's question, from what I heard, I didn't really fully get an answer from that. But also, there was a comment made about the single point of access being in the local plan since its inception. But having had a look back at the local plan actually says principal access from Mendip Way with comprehensive access into the existing road network. Well, principal access, by its definition, means the first within a group. It means the opposite of not a single. You can't say it's a single point in the local plan, because that's not what the local plan says. So I wonder if you want to reconsider that, and has that impacted any of your consultations? Because if that's what you've been saying is in the local plan and it's not, that sounds like incorrect information. And additionally, I would like to understand a bit more about the modal shift required to make your models work, because we didn't really get an answer to that.
Yes, so I've been involved in the promotion of this site for 15 years. Emanuele and Edward have been involved even longer. They were at all the discussions and presentations to get this plan allocated. They were involved in all the studies that were produced and scrutinised by the local plan committee and local plan examiner. And through all of those, one point of access off Mendip was proposed. So there has never been a consideration of a second point of access. In fact, the single point of access off Mendip Way came into the site and was proposed to split quite soon, so that it would enter under the pylons and then split around the site quite soon. But actually, the one point of Mendip Way has been part of the promotions all along. So there's never been any option. It's always been one access point. That's always what's been proposed, and that's what's been tested through all the allocation. There is, of course, no opportunity for a second access. We know back lane is completely unsuited to additional vehicular access. It would be inappropriate to increase capacity on back lane. It is a lane. It is not a distributor road. It is not a road that was designed to carry any amount of traffic. So while the wording might say principal, there has never been an alternative option for access. So yes, that I understand that's what the wording says, but we sat through all the local plan examinations and presentations and studies which were done at that stage. So it is nothing new. At no stage were further accesses proposed.
Quickly pick up the other question on the required modal shift that makes our model work. The actual modeling work has been commissioned through the Highway Authority, who have actually appointed a separate independent consultant to run that model. So all the assumptions in there have been validated by them, and they are not like if we're plugging in our own subjective assumptions in the model. So it is an independent review. This traffic assessment exercise that has been completed.
Councillor Munter.
I am in agreement with you when you say that back lane wouldn't be appropriate access for this site. However, would an upgrade to Back Lane, making it a distributor road or increasing its capacity, would that not potentially serve as a second access? And if not, then why hasn't that been looked at?
So if we think about this strategically, as opposed to a junction where somebody might feel they are waiting too long, that would require the removal of how many kilometers of hedgerow, the destruction of how many kilometers of ditches, all of that for somebody who feels they're sitting at a junction too long when the evidence doesn't show that. That I think would be on the whole, a much more significant adverse effect. It could clearly not justify doing that for 600 dwellings.
Sorry.
Forgive me, Chair. Am I allowed to come back on that briefly?
Well, this questioning's been going on rather.
I'm aware. It's a very, very simple question, and I'm sure the applicant will be able to answer it with either a single word. But just to confirm, you haven't looked into the possibility of upgrading Back Lane, yes or no?
No. Simple answer, no.
And it would horrify Western Parish Council.
Common sense said no from the beginning.
Okay, that's questioning over. Councillor Daniel Allen to present item and referral. Sorry, thank you very much for answering all those questions. Councillor Daniel Allen.
Thank you. This is agenda item 9. Title of the report is The Land Northeast of Great Ashby GA2 Strategic Master Plan Framework. This report asks full council to approve the Strategic Master Plan Framework for land to the northeast of Great Ashby to full council. This site is allocated for development in the council's adopted local plan. Site GA2 Policy SP18 as a strategic site for approximately 600 homes and supporting infrastructure. The policies of the local plan require the preparation of a master plan for this site. A master plan for the site has been produced by the applicant team working with council officers and advisors. This has followed approved guidance and procedures. The draft master plan was subject to public consultation and independent design review to inform the final version. The master plan provides an appropriate framework for the future planning and development of this strategic site. The recommendation is the Strategic Master Plan Framework for the land northeast of Great Ashby local plan site GA2 attached at Appendix A is approved and adopted as a material planning consideration for relevant planning decisions related to the site. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Can I have a proposer? Oh, Val.
Happy to propose.
And a seconder. Councillor Debenham.
Happy to second.
Thank you. Can we move to the debate, please? Councillor Muncer.
I'll start us off, shall I? So can I first of all just take the opportunity to thank the team of which was just before us for answering the questions of which were fielded to them. I think they provided an awful lot of detail and certainly, helped to clarify a number of different points. I just want to sort of highlight a few observations here because we've talked a lot about data. And data is all about how you interpret it. It is not necessarily a given. And particularly relating to the single point of access, there is a significant concern that actually that is not going to be suitable or appropriate on this site. Now, we've heard a lot about modal shift. We've heard a lot about active travel. And whilst those principles ought to be supported, they don't necessarily align with the realities of people's every day-to-day lives. And that modal shift is very much going to be a generational one, if indeed it happens at all. And therefore, it would be wrong for us to prioritize that shift on increased pedestrianisation, increased cycle networks, as opposed to primary highways. Now, what is concerning is that, and I hear what the applicant is saying with respect to the second point of access on Back Lane, it's not just 600 homes of which are being proposed here, it is also the 330 homes of which are being proposed to be brought forward under the GA1 development, of which is adjacent to Back Lane, and therefore an upgrade to it to improve manoeuvrability within both sites would, I would argue, outweigh any potential drawbacks from, removing a little bit of hedging. I think it's important that we continue this as a holistic approach, that discussions between officers, the developers of which are here tonight, and indeed the developers in GA1 and NS1 continue to liaise together in order to actually find a joint solution to issues such as healthcare, because that is a key and primary consideration. It's something that in my community in Codicott, who I represent, we're going to be seeing over 400 new homes developed, and we haven't seen any upgrades to healthcare. It's important that that does not happen in Great Ashby should this master plan be approved. And equally, it's important that there continues to be consultation with the local community in order to ensure that the concerns of the local community are mitigated to the best and greatest extent available.
Thank you, Ralph. Somebody left out some bits on my notes. I should have asked the officers to present the report. That's what we're going to do now.
Thanks, Chair. We've got some slides to run through. Obviously, it's a very visual item being a master plan, so obviously helpful to run through some plans. One of the vagaries of the Constitution, unfortunately, we couldn't do this before the public participation, which may have aided things along, but there we go. Could you make those full screen, please? So first couple of slides are for context, and they're applicable to both the sites we're looking at tonight. So we have got these slides again on the next presentation, but hopefully we'll gloss straight over them because it's exactly the same point. As covered briefly by Councillor Allen in his introduction, all the master plan sites we're looking at have followed a similar process and was outlined in the public participation, with a council-led officer team effectively set up to mirror the applicant teams, so with specialist input, including from Herts County Council on highways and education, and specialists on ecology, heritage, landscape, and so on. This master plan, we've been formally working with Picture Estates Limited for about 20 months, but prior to that through the local plan and the emerging policies on design. As has been outlined, all these sites are from the council's adopted local plan. So first slide there, the map is just for some context, just to get your bearings. That's Hitchin on the left-hand side and Stevenage greyed out along sort of the bottom right. And we're looking in this instance at GA2, which is the site on the very bottom right-hand side. And the local plan overall aims to deliver 13,000 homes over the period 2011 to 31. And as part of that, the council identified and made the case that larger extensions to the main towns were the most sustainable areas for development and should form the bulk of the delivery in the plan. Go to the next slide, please. And to account for that and the fact that because we hadn't produced a plan for a number of years, we were coming from a very low base, the council successfully argued for quite heavy backloading of the plan targets, which in short said we made the case we should deliver less homes earlier on the basis we would deliver more homes later. We've just about kept track along the less homes bit, but as you can see from the graph there, the more homes bit is about to kick in. So therefore it is incumbent on the council to try and make expedient process on all of these sites as that uplift kicks in now. So next slide. As we've talked about before and is covered in your report and at the briefings, important to be clear, the master plan is one step in planning and delivery. It's been preceded, as we've heard already, by the local plan allocation, and it precedes the regulatory approvals. And some of that work, as the picture team outlined, is ongoing in parallel. And obviously a lot of the questions that were raised following their presentation, particularly around off-site works, transport modelling, etc. Obviously, when applications come in front of Planning Control Committee, that's the chance for councillors to sort of really dig into that, and obviously Highways Authority will be present at those meetings. So in terms of the master plan, it's not a full technical evidence base, but it's about having sufficient information to make sure that what we're presenting to you now can be deliverable when we get to those later stages. Next, please. So turning specifically to GA2, all of the slides that follow are taken from the summary document that was part of your agenda pack, and that's pages 159 to 164 of anyone who is scrolling through as I speak. Again, Great Ashby in its context there, with Northern Stevenage and Great Ashby, the GA1 site, and just on the left-hand side, you're looking there, the two Stevenage sites that we'll come to later, but also are of some relevance, particularly on things like health. For context, because I appreciate some of these kind of difficult to gauge scale, we're looking at around 1 kilometre kind of side to side diagonally, and a little bit less sort of front to back. So from Mendip Way to the back of the allocation is a little less than that. And in that summary document, obviously gives you some key facts, and Councillor Allen's outlined sustainability aspirations. Next slide. Through the master plan process, perhaps goes to one of the points that Councillor Ward's raising, because he asked about kind of what's changed. Perhaps less so in response to the public consultation was outlined, but certainly through the master planning process, there are a number of things that have changed through negotiation with the Picture Estates team and specialists on our side. I won't run through them all because it's all in the paperwork, but probably a couple of key ones. Number one on the diagram there is the moving of the allotments, originally proposed off-site, now brought really into the core of the site to help make that social hub. Around numbers 4 and 5, so rationalising development and highway infrastructure to minimise impact. As we've heard already, obviously there's a lot of woodlands, important habitat in and around this site, so trying to preserve those and the connections between them has been really important. And also moving the sustainable travel connection, which will double as an emergency access up towards the north of the site. And I'm sure we may well return to that in any questions. Next slide, please. So this plan just sets out the overall structure, and it's probably important just to reiterate that the plans like this are kind of the level of detail of the key framework plans that we're looking at, and kind of the level of detail we're at master plan level, and that we're asking you to consider and approve. So as Picture outlined, the site's been designed around the woodland blocks, around the green infrastructure. The school and the proposed community hub, so the school shown in purple, are to the north of the site in line with policy, and then a series of residential parcels. Next, please. There's a diverse range of open space there, so making sure we meet different requirements, so as well as formal open space, obviously a lot of habitat, natural spaces given the context of the site, so they're the ones there in blue. A linear park through the centre, incorporating the access and under the pylons, as people are aware of the context there, which changes in character. So some of it more formal, aimed squarely at public access, some of it more natural in its state. Quite a lot of planting around the boundary in recognition that we've now got a new greenbelt boundary and a new settlement edge, and an indicative distribution of where the play might be. But we recognise that's one of the areas that we do need to continue to work on, and perhaps again, some of the points raised by Councillor Williams, that's further discussions with Great Ashby Community Council, with the community, about what's the best long-term distribution of play facilities in Great Ashby as a whole. And as Picture alluded to, it's sort of incumbent on us as a council to facilitate any discussions with further landholders as part of that. Next, please. In terms of movement, so the main plan shown here is the active travel framework. We've had a lot about walking and cycling. So kind of key points are, walking and cycling, segregated walking and cycling access on the main route from Mendip Way, and then a kind of trident of routes, ensuring you get access to all areas of the site from that main point of access, so up towards the community facilities, through the parkland in the centre, and down to the residential at the southeast. Also, number 7 on that plan, a walking and cycling connection through from the site into Merrick Close. That's particularly important in terms of links to the existing community and potentially the GA1 site to gain access to the new primary school. So the school on this site is large enough to serve more pupils than just the development itself. So we anticipate it will help alleviate some of the pressures we know have been in Great Ashby for a number of years, with Round Diamond School significantly oversubscribed. And as mentioned as well, the bridleway at the southeast corner. Some of the smaller plans, not overly legible at this scale, but again, you can zoom in and out on your packs, cover the bus loop. So there's a commitment in the master plan to having that loop within the site from the access from Mendip Way. And also, which is the plan at the bottom left, how it's going to incorporate and link into the rights of way network. So obviously a lot of rights of way, footpaths, bridleways in this area, and ensuring both existing and future residents still have that access out into the countryside. There was some discussion previously about community facilities and access to those. So based on the proposal so far in the illustrative master plan, we've mapped out some of the key walking and cycling distances, and as the public participation sort of went through relatively short walking and cycling distances, both within the site. So we're estimating around sort of 9-10 minute walk from one side of the site to the other in terms of getting to the school. And then, as you can see, down to the community facilities, the existing school, the community centre, Budgeons and so on in the community centre being, depending on where you are in the site, between a sort of 10 and probably a maximum 20-minute walk. Vehicular access has been mentioned, as I think we're all clear on now, that the access for private vehicles will be in and out of Mendip Way in accordance with the requirements of the local plan policy. At this stage, in terms of the street hierarchy in the site, we really only wanted to fix it kind of as far as those dark blue lines go. So saying the primary street will come in through that main access and then turn left and right. As outlined in the report, obviously we've been working closely with Picture Estates, but ultimately they're the landowner and not a developer. There will be a development partner or developers to come on board later in the process, and we want to be able to have a conversation with them about what's the right hierarchy of streets as you get deeper into the site. But mindful, obviously, it will ensure you can get all the way around. And those two blue dots, again, came up in the previous questions. So those are areas where we've already got a commitment from the landowner, an agreement in principle with the Highway Authority to have pinch points, effectively single lane running through a short distance to make sure that we can minimise the impact on those important wildlife corridors. And phasing, again, as mentioned previously, looking at obviously getting the access into the site, that core area and delivery of the school site in a first phase, and then essentially extending out towards the site edges, and then finally out towards the east and southeast in the final phase. That can only be illustrative at this stage. As I say, we have partners unknown still to come on board in this project who may have views, but essentially approving this in the master plan gives you a kind of a degree of direction to give to anyone who comes in of, you know, the council has an expectation certainly around that core part of the site, the school infrastructure and so on being early in any delivery. And then finally, that comes together in an illustrative master plan, which shows how a scheme could be realised. Emphasis very much on illustrative. We're not asking full council to approve the level of detail shown in that plan in terms of the internal routes. It is simply one example of how, if you put all the layers together that are in those earlier plans, the scheme could be realised. And as I've previously said, and as per the report and presentation, this site is currently in private ownership, obviously aiming to progress through to outline application as was explained to you. And further detailed work on the scheme will follow once development partners or developers for the site are known. Thank you, and happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Nigel. I've got Councillor Albert. Is that questions?
Yep, question. Yeah, just I'd be interested on two points from sort of North Herts Council perspective. First of all, I think in the previous discussion, Councillor Williams raised about the disused piece of land. Be interested to know kind of the ownership of that land and what, from the council's point of view, the potential future intentions are, and whether there's any way of incorporating that into any of this. It feels like it's too late, but I'd be interested to know on that. And the second area was clearly the one that would sounds though Weston Parish Council would be concerned about, which is the upgrading of Back Lane. I think Councillor Munster described it as a little bit of hedging. I'd be interested to know from the North Lancs Council's perspective whether it is just a little bit of hedging that needs, or this is from my memory of driving along it, quite a difficult and very nice country lane at the moment. But be interested to get your perspective from the council's perspective.
Thanks, Councillor Albert. Yeah, on the additional land, obviously as the landowner outlined to you, clearly they can only plan for what's within their gift, and we've master planned for the extent of the allocation. Obviously, yeah, we're aware of there's that extra run of land under the pylons on the opposite side of Mendip Way, currently in private ownerships. Probably about sequencing, in the sense I think this scheme needs to make progress in order to be able to then go and have a conversation with the owners of that land about what may or may not happen on there in the future. Could be play, could be connections, could be leaving it as it is. You know, we know there's kind of wildlife makes use of that area. We've had residents mention that to us in past. In terms of Back Lane, obviously the only access proposed onto that is the emergency access, and that will only require relatively low level works to what's there at the moment. So yeah, we're certainly not aiming to update it to a distributor road or anything, as alluded to by Councillor Munster. I don't know, Edward, if you want to add anything on the emergency access.
I think the idea of putting more traffic onto Back Lane would require far more extensive upgrades and essentially a new road, probably to the A1, which was once proposed many decades ago, I understand, but has fallen away. And as the applicant indicated, there is no way that a development of this size could pay all that kind of intervention, even if it were supported by policy, which of course it isn't. Thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you. You mentioned the cycle times within the site and to the local community facilities. Do you know what the cycle time would be to Stevenage train station?
Not off the top of my head, no. I think the work around cycling is, Edward May, is mainly sort of focused on kind of, well, routes within the site, and then how you connect, as was mentioned before, to kind of points where the Stevenage network kicks in, on the assumption that once you're on that, then clearly the routes open up to the town centre and other destinations.
So a realistic cycling time is about 20 minutes. Someone who's reasonably fit and so going for it and doing it on a regular basis, probably 15 minutes. They're using an e-bike, then certainly 12 or 15 minutes.
Councillor Pupas-Singham.
Thanks, Chair. I was just wondering, is either Nigel or Edward able to comment on what we heard earlier about the proposals from the bus company to go via Great Ashby Way now, as opposed to Mendip? That is one of those big concerns from the community, and we've not heard of that up until it was mentioned just shortly ago.
So at this stage, we are looking at a master plan, and this doesn't go into that level of detail. But in the background, we are looking at the evidence needed for the outline planning application for this site, and also in conjunction with GA1. The options that we're looking at are a bus service that comes in off Great Ashby Way and enters the site from Mendip Way from the south and then exits the south. That is one option. The preferred option, given that by the time GA2 starts to be built out, GA1 will also be being built out and will probably be being occupied. The preference is to actually have a bus service that can serve both sites. So then it would need to go all the way along Mendip Way and enter from the north. The expectation is that actually it will exit down towards the community centre, down to the Great Ashby Way roundabout, in order to provide the link into the centre of the community, but then actually would return along Mendip Way in order to serve GA1. That the service that's envisaged to do that would complement the existing SB7 service. So this would be a service that would go to Lister Hospital and the secondary schools, and then down through the old town into the new town. So Great Ashby would gain a service which it doesn't have now, and it would gain better access to bus service because there would be a more frequent service going to different destinations. So although we fully recognise that to achieve that will require displacement of parking, and neither we nor the applicant has underestimated the challenge of doing that and the evidence that needs to be produced to convince planning committee ultimately that that is achievable. And so we have set the applicants of both GA1 and GA2 the task of gathering compelling evidence to demonstrate that it is feasible to do what they are proposing and what we want to support.
Councillor Jarvis.
Thank you. I've got two questions. The first relates to the emergency access and the clear concern that there is about what use that might be put to. I mean, is there a mechanism by which the council can secure, clearly at the later in the process than this, but can secure that it is only an emergency access and can't be used for other purposes? My second question relates to some of the discussion we've had about off-site work in order to support the development. And from that point of view, my understanding is that this is a master plan and therefore doesn't have the same constraints about not specifying things outside the red line that a planning application should. And therefore it's reasonable to expect that the master plan should set out what off-site works they would expect to try and secure via Section 106 or Section 278 agreements in order to ensure the overall development is acceptable. Is that a reasonable assumption that that's how the overall package should be indicated as part of the master plan?
Councillor Jones, to answer your first question about the emergency access, the access would be restricted physically, so it would be either lockable bollards or a lockable gate. So it will be physically not be possible to drive a vehicle through there. The lock-on that's used is one that all the emergency services would have a key to, so the emergency services can get through that when they need to. So there shouldn't be any issues with enforcing that. I'll pass over to Nigel to answer the off-site works, but I can provide further detail if needed. Thank you.
Yeah. Certainly in terms of the master plan, so within the master plan document itself, there's a section on delivery and management, and it outlines, firstly, there's been a comprehensive accessibility audit, so looking at improvements that might be needed, and at master plan level, there's a commitment to sort of broad routes and improvement, the sorts of improvements you can expect to see within them. So in terms of cycling in particular, there's one essentially sort of going south towards the Nobel School, which will be the nearest secondary school, and the other is going more southwest to join in towards the route goes towards Stevenage Town Centre. So as I think was outlined in answers to the earlier questions, the work has been undertaken to look at kind of what sort of missing links there are, whether it's all small scale works like cleaning, resurfacing, and so on and so on. But the detail ultimately in the offsite works will be secured through the application and the 106 and the 278 agreements. If you want to.
So just to add a little detail to that. So one of the reasons for not going into too much detail in the master plan is that things change. So one of the things that was identified through the evidence gathering for this site was the need for a connection from the Bridleway to the top of Wedgwood Way, which is the road that runs down south through the industrial estate, which provides actually the most direct route into the Stevenage cycling network, which is one of the questions that was raised earlier, because there is an underpass of Martin Way, which then links into the segregated cycle network. And that connection has actually has now been built. So therefore, this application doesn't need to deliver that. But we've also looked at upgrades to the paths through St Nicholas Park, and other routes. So yes, this information is being gathered in the background. At the master plan stage, it is essentially committing to a package of measures that delivers a required outcome, which is to support the modal share of sustainable transport. And the detail of the package will be partly developed for the outline planning application and then further developed through the Section 106 negotiation. Thank you.
Councillor Williams.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about the the access again. So across the two developments, it's 900 additional homes coming off of Mendip Way, which currently supports 600 homes with passage and some parking. And he talks about the feasibility studies on the bus routes and the removal of the car parking to facilitate the bus route. I want to know more about what the plans are for that, because that's a significant disruption. And I'd like to know what happens if the feasibility studies show that it's not feasible to make the changes that would be needed for that bus route.
I think we need to differentiate between the purpose of the master plan, which is to secure good development. It is not to test the acceptability of development in planning terms. That test will follow as part of the outline planning application and the consideration of that. So although we are working on the evidence for that and to answer that question, it's not the purpose of the master plan to provide that level of reassurance. It's to set it's essentially to set the challenge that needs to be met for the outline planning application, which is what we're working on. Just to give you a flavour of it, the level of detail of analysis of existing parking usage at peak times, so i.e. overnight along Mendip Way, that's both applicants have been surveying that. They've also been surveying the usage of the parking courts to understand how much capacity may be there, also recognizing that some of those are allocated spaces. And looking at the side streets as well. So, the level of detail that the applicants are gathering in readiness for the outline planning application, I can assure you, is as comprehensive as it can possibly be. So it will ultimately be for the planning committee to determine whether that evidence is plausible and supports the application. But in terms of what the master plan is trying to achieve, we are comfortable that it is setting the right targets.
Councillor Pupala Singham.
Thanks, Chair. So I'm just looking at the illustration 6.1 on page 125. So you can use any illustration, but that's a good one for my question, I suppose. So the single point of access coming in, so all the cars going into the GAT site are going to be feeding through Great Ashby Way along there and into the GAT site. The Round Diamond School is right on that junction, and at any given time, it's already pretty crazy at drop-off or pick-up. And when I asked earlier, just to confirm, there are no off-site adjustments being proposed for the road network, if I understood. So nothing is being done on that junction. And I'm just asking if there's no safety concerns or that's been looked at already and everyone's quite happy that there's no risk to children primarily. And again, thinking about go to the community centre at 4 o'clock on an afternoon, it's already a horror show, to say it mildly. And there's now potentially 600 more cars going through that junction. And I appreciate that might be for a later stage, but I just wanted to check now.
Well, to give you a flavour of the number of vehicle trips that the development will generate. So let's take the upper level, an upper figure of 640 homes, which is that's the number in the master plan as the indicative capacity of the site. You will probably all expect that all of those homes will have 2 cars. So let's take 1,280 vehicles as being the number of vehicles on that site. Now, you may also imagine that the majority of those vehicles are used for people to travel to get to work, drop the kids off at school or whatever. And so you are seeing some large proportion of that 1,280 vehicles moving within the same hour. Actually, the applicant for GA1 has already done traffic surveys to see how much traffic is generated in Great Ashby now, to see what the number of trips that would be generated per 100 homes or whatever would be. And actually works out as about 290 trips being generated out, vehicular trips being generated out of GA2 in the morning hour, in the peak hour, and 110 inbound. Now that works out as about 5 a minute going out and about 2 a minute traveling in. So I think if you picture what that's like, it's not quite the level I imagine you're expecting. In terms of the off-site interventions, I think the question was understood as being highway capacity interventions, and those aren't proposed. But what are expected to be proposed are improvements to support active travel, so walking and cycling. There will be a pedestrian crossing south of the access, so it's a pedestrian crossing of Mendip Way south of the access into GA2 to facilitate access for walking and cycling into the site and onto the shared use path on the west side of Mendip Way. And at that Great Ashby Way roundabout, it is expected that there will be significant improvements to the crossing provision there, with either priority or even possibly signalised junction crossings a lot around there to facilitate access to the school, to the community centre and so on. It's also anticipated there will be a bus stop added to Mendip Way to the north of that, and therefore we'd need to make sure that there's good pedestrian access to that. So and that's just the interventions that are closest there. There will be other interventions expected on all of the routes that people will be expected to walk and cycle. So to rest assured that there will be a comprehensive package of interventions to support this development.
I think that was the end of the questions. I can see that Ralph Munzer is, but I know that you had started the debate before. And I wonder, you do. Is it a quick one, please?
It is. It was just one for Mr. Smith, and focusing on developer contributions. Has a Section 106 agreement been negotiated, or is that something for a later stage?
That's for the outline planning applications, or beyond the resolution to grant the outline application.
It was indeed a quick question. I did keep my promise, Chair.
I wondered, as we're in the debate now, did you want to recap very briefly what you said at the beginning all those hours ago?
I'm looking to colleagues here. I will
That's a no. That's a no.
I'm just summarising in two quick points. Healthcare, making sure that we're continuing to engage with all parties of who are involved, and obviously the concerns of which are around access and accurate modelling. But other than that, I look forward to hearing what colleagues have to say.
Thank you. Okay, who's next? Councillor Jarvis.
Thank you. Well, we've clearly had an interesting discussion around the significant issues, and I think it's clear that there are a number of aspects of the master plan which are put forward good solution, and there are a number of challenges. Councillor Munzer has highlighted that they are access and that there's clearly an issue around healthcare. I think for the reasons that were set out in the questions earlier, it's very difficult for the master plan process to deal with the issues of healthcare provision, because that's clearly something which is the responsibility of the NHS and the Integrated Care Board. And I think it's probably fair to say it's difficult for the council or developers to engage them in the sort of way that we all think is necessary. However, the matter of the access issues is another matter. Clearly, that's the most substantial issue relating to this site. And clearly, there's a question in many people's mind as to whether or not the local plan should include an allocation for 600 houses with a single access. But it does, although it does talk about a principal access, and it isn't clear what the alternative is. I can't say I share Councillor Munzer's desire to use Back Lane as an alternative access. But I would actually suggest it's not our role to come up with alternative proposals in the master plan. It's our role to decide whether or not the plan as presented is satisfactory. The local plan requires comprehensive integration into the existing pedestrian, cycle, public transport and road network. And it would be my contention that what's on offer in this master plan could not be described as comprehensive. I think we're told that the intended solution works so long as we get a level of modal shift which can't be defined. And I think we would all like to see a significant amount of modal shift. You know, there's an objective in the County Council's local transport plan to achieve modal shift. When I last asked the highway officers what degree of modal shift had been achieved since that plan was introduced, the answer was none. In fact, it might even have been a bit negative. So I think to set out a solution that only works if modal shift is achieved on unprecedented levels might most favourably be described as optimistic. I think there's some local reasons why it will be difficult to achieve here. There is a long walk or cycle, about 300 metres, through a relatively isolated wooded corridor, which I think is going to be seen as unattractive in the dark and unattractive in the wet. It's potentially as much of 1,000 metres to the Great Ashby Community Centre from some parts of this development. It could take 20 minutes. I think even if it's only going to take 15, I think most people's default position on the journey of that size will be to get in their car. And I don't believe that the disincentives to do that are going to be sufficient. So I think that that's a really significant issue, which means that the access arrangements are not satisfactory. Now, I accept that it's going to be very difficult to come up with a satisfactory access arrangement given the limitations of the site. But nevertheless, I think we're entitled to expect the master plan to set out something that we believe is achievable. And I think for the reasons I've just described, that what is before us this evening doesn't meet that requirement. On a second issue, another part of the local plan requires structural planning along site boundaries to reinforce the green belt boundaries. And the current master plan says possible planting. I accept that could relatively easily be changed. The word possible could be deleted, and that part of the master plan might be acceptable, but it's there at the moment. Clearly, it would be much more difficult to deal with the access issues, but I think that they are significant.
Thank you, Steve. I've got nobody else indicating they want to speak. So I will go to the vote.
Chair, the motion's carried.
Okay, as we've been at this for a couple of hours now, I will say we'll go for a 10-minute break. So could we please be back at 9:35? Okay, we're now starting the North of Stevenage Strategic Master Plan. We are joined by Mr. Kelly, who will be providing a presentation for members regarding North Stevenage Strategic Master Plan Framework. Can I invite Mr. Kelly to make his 5-minute presentation to members?
Thank you. Yes, it has. Good evening. So I am Richard Kelly of Crowdace Homes, the developer for the land north of Stevenage. Crowdace is a family-owned house builder operating across the home counties with a good track record of delivering successful communities with high levels of customer satisfaction, and our regional office is here in Letchworth. We have worked extensively over several years with your officers and Herts County Council officers in producing this master plan for North Stevenage, which is allocation NS1 in your adopted local plan. We have also engaged with the general public and other stakeholders, including Gravely Parish Council, Stevenage Borough Council, and the developers of the adjoining site to the south, known as Site H03 in the Stevenage local plan, and now being developed under the name Forster Park. The master plan we have produced is aimed at securing a high-quality development here to meet the needs in the area, delivering 900 homes, 40% of which will be affordable, supported by appropriate infrastructure, notably including a primary school, community facility, allotments, and open space. The master plan before you tonight can be seen as one part of a multi-stage process. The overarching principle of development and broad policies have already been set by your local plan. The role of this master plan is to expand on those policies and to be used in assessing the outline planning application in due course. More detailed consideration of impacts and how they have been assessed and mitigated will form part of that determination of the outline planning application. There will also be a design code to inform the detailed appearance and operation of the development to be implemented through the reserved matters applications. There were a number of points raised by councillors when the previous draft master plan was presented to full council in July. In response, we have made changes where we are able, noting that some of the points raised are more pertinent to other stages in the process, as has been further explained in your officer's report. In particular, we have amended the draft master plan to more clearly show how the site integrates with H03 and the surrounding area. The two sites work together to provide facilities in a cross-boundary fashion. In particular, H03 provides the retail facilities and NS1 provides the community building. We have also updated the master plan to show the approved H03 scheme for context and to illustrate estimated walking and cycling times across the wider area to give a better sense of scale and integration. It can now be seen that the furthest points of NS1 from the proposed shops on H03 are still within a 4-minute cycle or 16-minute walk at average cycling and walking speeds. On the question of physical integration between NS1 and H03, the location and nature of the connection points were extensively considered prior to Stevenage Borough Council granting the H03 consents, with input from Herts County Council as Highways Authority and yourselves as Neighbouring Planning Authority. The positions of pedestrian, cycle and vehicular connection points between the sites are in line with officers' advice on how best to integrate the schemes and to prioritise walking, cycling and bus links while still catering for direct private car access between NS1 and H03. The positions also take into account ecological sensitivities along an existing tree belt that forms part of the boundary. These access points are now fixed by the H03 consents, which are now under construction. Since the July Council meeting, we have also had further meetings with the NHS. They have not yet reached a conclusion on whether they will want a GP surgery at the community centre here or not, but the master plan leaves that possibility open. The Section 106 agreement will be the appropriate mechanism for determining whether the GP provision should be provided via an on-site facility here or a financial contribution to let the NHS enhance provision off-site to serve this area. We are also aware of the Council's recent adoption of the Sustainability Supplementary Planning document. Sustainability has always formed an integral part of this scheme, with the master plan setting out a range of measures which could be adopted here. The actual detail of the chosen measures and how they relate to your recent SPD's ratings will be determined through the later stages of the process. In terms of those later stages, the outline application has been submitted, accompanied by an environmental statement on account of the scheme being over the thresholds for requiring environmental impact assessment. Discussions on the application continue with your officers ahead of it being brought to your planning committee for consideration in due course. The master plan before you tonight will therefore help guide those next stages to bring this new community forward, and we commend it to you for your adoption. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kelly. Are there any points of clarification? And can I remind people that this is not a planning application, this is the master plan. So are there any questions or points of clarification that anybody would like to make? There are not. Okay, thank you very much. That's concluded the public participation for this item, and I remind members that no further questions can now be asked of the public participant. Councillor Allen to present the item referral A8C from Cabinet, page 5 of the supplementary agenda.
Thank you very much, Chair. This report seeks full council support to adopt the master plan for the north of Stevenage as a material consideration. As councillors will recall, full council considered a master plan for this site in July. Following debate, council resolved not to adopt. A number of the issues were raised in questions and debate, and full council requested further consideration by officers and the project team. This report provides an update on those issues. It clarifies a number of matters and highlights changes that have been made to the master plan document. As with the previous item, more visual material has been included in the report, and a summary has been prepared and circulated. The report clarifies the access arrangements into the site and with the adjoining development being built in Stevenage, that cars will be able to circulate within and between the two schemes using the access point from North Road and an internal connection at the east of the site. The relationship between the social and community infrastructure being provided across the two schemes. That all parts of the NS1 site are within a 20-minute walk of the planned school and shops on the Stevenage site. How the council has engaged and will continue to engage with the NHS at the formal planning stage, and how the scheme will address the council's expectations in the recently adopted sustainability SPDs, aiming to meet the gold standard for open space, healthy placemaking, sustainable travel, and sustainable drainage. The updated master plan and additional information presented in this report was considered by the council's internal project board at a meeting in October. Project board agreed the master plan should progress for reconsideration. All councillors were invited to an officer briefing held on the 6th of November 2024. I'd like to invite officers to give a presentation of key plans and information to inform the debate. Thank you.
I'll just wait for the slides.
I think, as Nigel mentioned, we can skip the first three and go straight to the summary. Next slide, please. Perfect, thank you. So this is NS1 in context, as we've mentioned before, and at the briefing, I'll just do a quick whistle-stop tour of the main elements of the master plan. As you can see, it is adjoining the HO3 site in Stevenage, and it's next to GA1 as well. The allocation is for up to 900 homes, and that also includes a primary school and a community hub. In terms of where it is, as Mr. Kelly has already mentioned, the outline planning application was submitted in December 2023, and Crowdace have committed through a PPA to also work with officers on a design code process. We finished 8 of those workshops, and that's really looking at the detail of this master plan and how some of the things that we've secured in the master plan will actually be bottomed out sort of on the ground. They're quite heavy files. Okay, the scheme went to Design Southeast for design review panel in February 2023. Key changes, I won't go through every number, but key changes include an increased buffer to Gravely Village, which is very important. A straight avenue and view to the community centre from North Road. more of a place on the boundary. So as we've mentioned before, there's a very ecologically sensitive edge between HO3 and NS1 that we've considered quite well. And the idea was to, rather than create back-to-backs, to make this more of a space. So where number 7 is, you can see that it's a play space and it's to draw people through and to really make it a sort of active boundary between the two sites. That's in addition to the sort of 8 other crossing points across the boundary. The frontage of the community centre was amended as well to provide more frontage to the central park that runs north-south and follows the line of the public footpath. Options for the bus routes were also tested, and the alignment of the linear park in the left-hand side of the development was amended to provide a key access connecting the south of the site to the allotments on the north. Next slide, please. In terms of settlement structure and layout, it's pretty self-explanatory, but there are 2 key neighbourhoods. The one on the left is more urban, and it's considered an extension of Stevenage itself. It's more formal, and it has a sort of residential density proposed around 35 to 40 dwellings per hectare, apart from the plots that address Gravely Village to the north, which will go down and be more sparse to address that rural edge. And then on the right, you have the more village rural settlement with a village green in the centre and a proposed residential density of around 25 to 35. The radial structure really tries to draw views out to the landscape and make as much use as we can of the beautiful landscape that surrounds the site. Nature, open space and ecology. Again, the diagram is hopefully self-explanatory, but this is the level of detail that we're securing in the master plan stage, and more detail is being worked through at the design code. So where the trees are planted, what species, how far apart they are, where the paths run, etc., etc. Those are all elements that we've been covering in the design code. But at master plan stage, there's the central park that runs north-south, connecting into the New Country Park as part of HO3, and that's shown in peach. And then each of the neighbourhoods, both on the left and the right, have a central green space shown in purple. One is a linear park running north-south, and one is a village green in the centre. Next slide, please. Movement, access and parking. I'm not a transport officer, so I'll do my best, but Edward can answer any questions following this. One key main bus route that is shown in black with an area of, with a bus gate shown in the dotted line to provide a sort of car-free access around the school to encourage walking and cycling, but also an active space around the school. And then that's supported by a secondary road shown in the dotted blue line that provides access to all the development parcels around the site. That is further supported by a series of tertiary streets and edge lanes to create a comprehensive network of permeable streets across the site. Next, please. As Daniel alluded to, from the furthest part of the site, it's a 16-minute walk to the neighbourhood centre in HO3 or a 4-minute cycle, and you can see that it has been designed as a very walkable, sustainable neighbourhood where you can definitely imagine walking from one end to the other fairly easily. Next slide, please. And the phasing strategy, that will be developed in the next stages, as will the triggers to deliver the school. And we've already been having discussions around meanwhile use in the school and how to activate that site should it not come forward with the first phase. In terms of phasing, it's most likely that development will be built out from west to east to consider the main access point. And we've also, as a council, expressed that we would like to adopt the key spaces. How this works with our biodiversity net gain requirement and maintenance and monitoring for 30 years is something we are still working through both on this site and others. And as I said, the design coding process is looking at the detail of these various elements as the next layer of the master plan. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Nope, there doesn't seem to be. So the recommendation is that following the full council decision not to adopt the master plan in July 2024. The additional information and clarification in this report is noted. And 2.2, the strategic master plan framework for North Stevenage attached to Appendix A is approved and adopted as a material planning consideration for relevant planning decisions relating to the site. Can I have a proposer? Councillor Allen.
Happy to propose, Chair.
And a seconder, David Winstanley.
Happy to second.
Thank you very much. So we can move on to the debate. Councillor McDonnell.
Thank you, Chair. I attended the Strategic Planning Board meeting in October to hear the update on the site. So thank you as well for Mr. Kelly for coming this evening to present to us as well, because that was a point at the July full planning, was that we didn't have a representative from Crowdace here to speak to us. I also want to note that the recommendation or the refusal at the July meeting was perhaps quite cruel to Crowdace, but actually it meant going back to the drawing board and looking at these points. And I think Councillor Collins was very confident in the fact that Crowdace would go back, they would reassess the points that were raised, and they would make the relevant improvements or come back with something that met our concerns or that relieved our concerns. And I think one of the biggest ones was the context between the Stevenage site and NS1. And looking at the diagrams, looking at the context of the site and actually seeing how the two work together, I think is a big improvement and a big help for us to make our decision this evening. I also, and I'm sure some people will disagree with me on this, but I do think that there were some failings with regard to the cross-border development. And I think that has been, it's been agreed or not agreed, but I don't know what the word is, registered by the council that there were failings and that we should work better together going forward. So in light of all of that, I think I will be supporting this master plan, and I do urge others to do the same.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you. And thank you so much to Crowdace for coming this evening. Thank you for the work they've done since July. And thank you for issuing all the councillors with a really handy summary of what's been looked at and the master plan summary report. They're really, really helpful. I think the main things I spoke about in July were stewardship, the integration into the other site, and something about the relative lack of community engagement. I think they have addressed those issues. I think, as Councillor McDonnell says, it's really, really helpful to see the two sites together and how they work together. I think that's a massive improvement, and hopefully that's a big learning point. It would have been much better to have built these together and planned them together with Stevenage, but that was out. That ship has sailed. That's out of our control. The site in Stevenage is now being built. At least we were able to agree the main access routes through the site, which is helpful. And then the stewardship point, I'm really heartened to hear that North Herts is thinking about adopting the spaces, the open spaces and the management of those. I understand that hasn't been fully agreed yet, but that's always a concern going forward, what is going to happen to those open spaces. So I'm heartened to hear about that. And I think Crowdace have worked hard to engage with us since July and to work to make the best, to make as many changes as they could within the constraints that they have. And I recognise that there are some things we would love to change that we just really can't because the Stevenage site is already under construction. So tonight I will be supporting this master plan. Thank you.
Councillor Munzer.
Thank you, Chair. And just to round off the points which I was trying to make earlier, so as I was saying, it is important, as Councillor Brown and Councillor McDonnell have raised, that actually, you know, we take a step back and we learn the lessons of this instance, and that actually we have a far more joined up approach when it comes to planning that transcends district borough borders, and that we sort of work together in order to try and get the best possible outcome for the communities of which are going to be impacted. But also it's good to see CrowdAce here. It's good of them to have provided us with the some additional documentation to highlight how they took the concerns back from council in September, and how they've addressed them. And certainly what I think this whole situation demonstrates is that this is not a body of which is just purely a rubber stamp. This is a body of which is going to provide proper scrutiny, proper oversight of the decisions of which we take and of which impact on our communities.
As there's no one else indicating they want to speak, I shall now move on to the vote.
Chair, the motion's carried.
Okay, now we're on to items referred from other committees. We'll now consider the remaining referral from Licensing and Regulations Committee from the 14th of October. Councillor Willoughby to present this referral.
Thank you, Chair. In the interest of brevity, because I'm sure we want to move on to the next items, there is a relatively little change to this. We have to publish a policy and review this every 3 years. As I'm sure you've probably had an opportunity to read this referral and the agenda and minutes from the previous Licensing Regulation Committee. The main things that I would highlight is that we've had safeguarding update to include the White Ribbon Campaign, Violence Against Women and Girls Charter, and child sexual exploitation, which are things that obviously we hold to be very important. But to be, I'm just going to now say that I would like to move the recommendations.
Councillor Daniel Allen.
Very happy to second, Chair.
The recommendation is that Council adopts the Statement of Gambling Principles 25/28 policy, and I've had the proposer and seconder. Is there any debate? No. So, oh, sorry, Councillor Allen.
Just a very short part to thank the officers for the hard work on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to the vote, please.
Chair, the motion's carried.
Thank you. Given the lateness of the meeting, it's been decided that the next item, the Constitutional and Governance Review, will be deferred until the next meeting in December. So we are now moving on to questions from members. We have 5 questions that have been submitted in accordance with Standing Order 4.8.11. The first one is a question from Councillor Barnes to put the question to Councillor Amy Allen, the Executive Member for Recycling and Waste Management.
Thank you, Chair. For Council in January, when discussing the planned removal of public litter bins arising from the new waste contract, the executive member for recycling and waste management said, once the proposed criteria is ready, I will be able to share it with ward councillors. Based on these criteria, the potential for removal list will be shared with members, the proviso being that if members collectively want to keep a bin, then another will have to go. We will be asking members to consider the need for the bin. We are also happy to engage with parish councillors who will no doubt have knowledge of need in their parish. The administration now appears set to go ahead with these plans without doing any of this. Last month, it wrote to parish councils where 30% or more will be removed, but did not supply the proposed criteria or the potential removal list, making it difficult for them to provide any meaningful feedback. Parishes below this threshold, like Nebworth or Great Ashby, as well as unparished areas like Baldock, Letchworth and Hitchin, received no proactive communication, and nor were ward councillors provided with any details about the impact in our areas, despite these very clear promises being made. Could the executive member therefore explain to council what has changed and why the administration now feels it is acceptable to go ahead with these plans without telling on which bins they intend to remove?
Can I invite Councillor Allen to respond, please?
Thank you, Chair. The Waste Client team are currently managing a programme of projects in order to ensure the successful implementation of a new waste recycling and street cleansing contract in May. Like all projects, they are reviewed as they are implemented. A member workshop was held on the 12th of September 2024, an opportunity for councillors to consider and comment on the criteria used in assessing the need for litter bins. Following this, the team communicated updates on the project via the Members Information Service, that is the MIS, which everyone gets every week. This provided updates on 2 occasions and is circulated to both ward and parish councillors. The second update also included a letter to be sent out to those impacted by 30% or more bins being removed. Parishes and ward councillors are welcome to contact the team if they have any concerns about their area or the project as a whole. Since the publication of the MAS note, the team have responded to approximately 40 inquiries about the project, including those not in the 30% bracket, such as Nebworth and Great Ashby, and have shared criteria for each area where requested. As an example, Nebworth Parish were proactive in engaging with the team on bins in their area and were able to identify bin locations which were felt to be of value over other areas. A new list has therefore been mutually agreed, affecting the same number of bins. The Waste Client team are continuing to liaise with other areas who have contacted them, including arranging site meetings where necessary. However, to remind members, the principles of the project have already been agreed and these will not change. Should members have any non-ward specific concerns about the rollout of the project, please get in touch with myself.
Thanks, Amy. Does Councillor Barnes have a supplementary question?
I do, thank you, Chair, and thank you for the answer. I would point out the proposed criteria or removal lists were not shared with ward councillors, which was the point of the question. And you're right, where my colleagues have engaged on this, like in Ickleford or Nebworth, alternatives have been found which better reflect local community priorities. So it's a shame that that didn't happen proactively. However, a supplementary is actually about the council's data, some of which has now been shared. Comparing notes with colleagues, there are some clear discrepancies in that data. In some cases, bins which are on the list either do not exist or were removed long ago. In other cases, bins which do exist are not on the list at all, meaning their future is unclear. Given these findings, are you confident that the decisions being made are robust and fair? And if you are, will you now agree to make the entire list available to members so that the plans can be properly scrutinised?
Councillor Allen.
I will speak to my service director and my contract manager about sharing details, but if there's bins that don't exist, that could be for many reasons, including someone's nicked it, as there's been a couple of occasions in Royston, or set fire to. So if those could actually be reported to us, that would be very, very helpful. I'll get back to you on all the other bits and pieces. I've spoken to Sarah.
Thank you. Okay, so the next question is about the Royston Learner Pool. Can I ask Councillor Johnson to put the question to Councillor Debenham, the Executive Member for Environment, Leisure and Green Spaces?
Thank you, Chair. Earlier this year, Cabinet resolved to explore further funding options for the Royston Learner Pool. Please could the executive member update council on the current status of this project?
Councillor Debenham.
Thanks, Councillor Johnson. Members will be aware that the current business case for building a learner pool at Royston is not affordable, and therefore Cabinet agreed not to proceed with the build at this time. However, officers have been investigating other potential sources of funding which could help bridge the funding gap. To date, the Council's grants officer has investigated opportunities for external grants, but unfortunately we have not found any suitable funds to apply to. Service Director of Place has also written to Royston Town Council to explore whether there could be any opportunities for them to provide funding. As of this moment, we have yet to receive a formal response. Separately, officers are exploring Section 106 contributions from future developments. Sports England have calculated a potential 180,000 contribution towards pool space, which could be allocated against any future project. The wider project to decarbonise Royston Leisure Centre and to build the gym extension is now entering into the detailed design stage, so it's highly unlikely that the building of a learner pool can be accommodated within this project. Therefore, any new business case would have to be considered post 2025-26. In the meantime, officers will continue to investigate opportunities, including alternative build designs, which may lower the overall capital costs.
Thanks, Councillor Debenham. Do you have a supplementary question?
I do, and thank you to the executive member for that. It's a lot better to hear that there's still options being explored than some of the noises off I've heard in recent weeks, including statements like never in a million years will it happen. I met with the leisure centre manager today, and I think there's a real opportunity, colleagues. Everyone active feels that almost a quarter of the proposed cost of this could be shaved off. And it's a real shame, although I do take the point, Councillor, that it can't be included in all of the works that are due to be finished in October 25. I think there is an opportunity, and I'd just like you to guarantee, please, that the scheme will not be cancelled permanently.
Councillor Debenham.
I think everybody here wants there to be a learner pool in Royston. The problems we're facing with getting grants, between 2019 and 2023, 85 pools have closed, public pools. So most of the grant funding is towards keeping existing pools open rather than extending ones that are there. But it's £2.5 million was put into the capital allocation for that in the 2024-25 budget, and it'll be down to the next budget. Well, I can't comment on whether it'll still be there, but it's not been removed as of yet.
Thank you, Councillor Debenham. The next question is from Councillor Ralph Muntzer about Churchgate regeneration. Can I invite you to ask your question to Councillor Daniel Allen, the Leader of the Council?
To ask the Leader of the Council how much the Churchgate regeneration project will cost and how the Council intends to fund the Churchgate regeneration project.
Could Councillor Allen please respond?
You know I can't answer your question, Ralph. The council is still working through the options, having listened to the public in our first round of consultations. Until we have a preferred scheme and know how this will be delivered, we're unable to answer.
Does Councillor Muntzer have a supplementary question?
I do indeed, Chair, and I have with me a copy of the North Hertfordshire Labour Party manifesto for the local elections of this year. And on page 14, and I'm more than happy to provide colleagues opposite with this, it says deliver the Churchgate project, and it says with a rubber stamp, a graphic saying that it's fully costed. Now, evidently, we've heard from the Leader of the Council that it isn't in fact fully costed because we don't know what the costs are at all. So does the Leader of the Council know something that evidently officers or members don't? Or was the Labour Party at the local elections at best being disingenuous to the residents of North Hertfordshire?
Can I invite Councillor Allen to respond?
Not going to laugh. It's a good try. Simply put, Councillor Munster, we listen to the public. We make sure that we fund everything correctly. So yes, we will make sure that we put it through with a rubber stamp. We will make sure that it happens, unlike the previous promises that have been made before this. And we will make sure that when it does happen, it's fully costed, and you'll be able to see that we get a lot more.
The next question is about the single person council tax discount. Can I invite Councillor Munster to put the question to Councillor Ian Albert, Executive Member for Finance and IT?
Thank you, Chair. To ask the Executive Member for Finance and IT, how many households and or residents in North Hertfordshire benefit from the single person discount on council tax?
Can I invite Councillor Albert to respond?
Cheers. Thanks, Chair, and thanks to Councillor Munster for the question. Simply put, on current numbers, there are 18,831 people claiming the single person's discount, which is approximately 33% of all the households in North Herts.
Councillor Munster, do you have a supplementary question?
Thank you. During the summer, the idea of the Labour government scrapping the single person council tax discount and thus depriving over, well, nearly 19,000 residents in North Hertfordshire of this crucial lifeline. Can the Executive Member for Finance and IT commit to maintaining the council single person council tax discount until 2028? The lifespan of this council?
Councillor Albert, can you respond?
You know, it begs belief that when I was getting a question like this as a supplementary, I mean, I was hoping that Councillor Munster would be asking, well, actually, have all the people needing single person discount are claiming it? Because that would be a really good question and a sensible question to ask, because that's how important that the single person discount. I'd like to think that Councillor Munster will be asking about what is and has been acclaimed by a number of local community organisations for our council tax reduction scheme with its new banding system that actually has benefited thousands of our residents. I'd like to think you would be asking about how we're going to improve that even more, but that clearly wasn't the question. But as Councillor Munster knows, the single person discount is not in the gift of any local authority, it is in the gift of government. The Chancellor clearly rightly decided that the single person discount will continue, and that I welcomed, and I hope that Councillor Munster will welcome that as well. But I do hope in actually asking a question and asking when we're actually looking at other motions, I'm not like Councillor Munster, going to hedge a particular answer. And what I'm going to say is what we can do as a council, and single person discount is not something that we can influence, but I certainly will be more than happy that if next time I see the Chancellor, I'll be more than happy to say thank you, Rachel Reeves, for continuing with the single person discount. That was absolutely the correct decision.
Thank you. And the final question is about civil enforcement officer roles. Can I invite Councillor Ralph Munster to put the question to Councillor Daniel Allen, the interim executive member for Planning and Transport?
Thank you, Chair. To ask the Executive Member for Planning and Transport, how many civil enforcement officers are currently employed by the council and how many civil enforcement officer posts are currently vacant?
Airport question all over again, isn't it?
Hello.
It comes back every few months. We have the equivalent of 11 full-time officers, with some posts being part-time. We currently have 9 posts filled, with 2 further posts recruited
2 with anticipated start dates in January of 2025. We have one part-time post vacant. We also have a parking enforcement manager and a parking services team leader. So if all staff are present now, we usually have 4 officers operating due to rest days. However, this number will drop if an officer is on annual leave or sick. So what are you promising people in Codicott?
Councillor Munster, do you have a supplementary?
I do indeed, Chair. I do indeed. And it's a less politically contentious question than the ones I've asked already this evening. But a concern that I'm sure the Leader of the Council knows is parking on Codicott High Street. And it's an issue of which people are rightly concerned about, particularly with the over 400 homes of which are proposed to be built in the village. Now, obviously, an awful lot of the civil enforcement officers are based and focused on our town centres and the car parks of which are situated there. But can I ask the Leader of the Council what steps are going to be taken to ensure that rural communities like Codicott and Kimpton get their fair share, and that parking restrictions are enforced in those rural communities to alleviate the pressures of drivers?
Parking restrictions in Codicott are minimal. The high street on Codicott does not have parking restrictions. There are only double yellow corner protectors at the junction with the High Street and Dollymore Close, Newton, Berry Lane and Heath Lane. Therefore, we have it as part of our mobile patrol, which means we drive through the High Street and we can make sure then if there is anyone parked illegally during the shift when the resources allow. Our officers do not walk patrol Codicott as it's unnecessary. They will drive patrol, and if a vehicle is observed to be parked in contravention, the officer will park and walk to the vehicle. Since the start of the financial year, we have issued 21 penalty charge notices, which is quite significant considering the minimal parking restrictions. It would tend to suggest that people struggle to park legally. It's worth noting blue badge holders can park on a double yellow line for up to 3 hours, and loading and unloading can take place on a double yellow line, if it's constant, for up to 30 minutes. Drivers could be parked on double yellow line corners because of a convenience shop. It would be very difficult to catch these drivers due to Codicott not having its own dedicated patrol. We acknowledge that. We cannot enforce vehicles parked on pavements if there is no parking restrictions. So all in all, we are making sure that we support those local areas. And it's very, very disingenuous to suggest that we don't.
Thank you very much. We are now moving on to motions. We've received 3 motions. However, we will be deferring the family farm, the impact on family farms to the next meeting.
Chair, I object.
So do I.
It will be dealt with on the 9th. It was being withdrawn for tonight. So the first motion is the Hitchin Industrial Estate fires. Can I invite Councillor John Claydon to move the motion, please?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. I recognise that it's getting late. No one in this chamber will be unaware that there was a major fire in Hitchin on the 8th of November this year. And it's certainly fair to say that very few people in and around Hitchin were unaware. In fact, it seemed to be pretty much all that anyone was talking about in Hitchin in town that day. It started in the early hours of the morning in a metal recycling centre in the industrial area of town, and it took much of the day for the fire service to get that fire under control. There was a huge plume of smoke visible across the town and well beyond, as I walked with my children to school, it was very visible, it was very obvious, alongside many other parents. As I said, lots of people were commenting on it. We were lucky, we were relatively far away from that fire. There were other schools in Hitchin and in neighbouring Ickleford that were much closer, much more directly affected. Sadly, this was far from an isolated incident. Again, as I'm sure you will all be aware, there were fires also in September of this year, in July, in February, and also in December of last year. 5 major recycling fires in the same area, the same town, all over the last year. Recycling is, of course, a vital function. It's an important part of sustainability and something that we should all support, but it must be safe. And it must be safe for the residents, for those people around the sites where it's being done. Batteries were thought to be the culprit for earlier fires. According to the local press, in this case, the cause is not fully known for this most recent fire, but it may well be the same. There is obvious significant air pollution as a result of this fire. And there's also risk of water pollution from these fires because the sites are close to the River Hitch. But how much pollution is there? Well, we can't really know that unless we have access to reliable monitoring information. And this is something that, as far as I'm aware, we don't have ready access to. How, therefore, do we know the air is safe to breathe? How can we tell residents that? Many people in this room have spoken publicly and called for action from the Environment Agency as a responsible body, and there has been a lot of joined up thinking in terms of trying to make that case, but not a great deal has actually happened. We haven't seen any serious leadership or communication from organisations with the responsibility to take action here. Therefore, I would say that this council needs to take some initiative. It needs to do what it can to make progress itself. We, of course, owe our gratitude to the Herts Fire and Rescue Service for responding to the fires promptly and effectively. But prevention is an important part of the equation. And I think here there is room for significant improvement. It's worth noting that 2 weeks before the latest fire, His Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary Fire and Rescue Services, which independently assesses the effectiveness of fire services, formally indicated a cause for concern over Herts Fire and Rescue, stating that prevention activity isn't a sufficiently high priority for the service. This motion therefore calls for 3 things: active pressure on the Environment Agency on behalf of the council to seek the licenses of the recycling centres to be reviewed urgently, proactive work to monitor pollution levels near the sites, air pollution, but of course, ideally water and soil as well, and effective communication with members of this council so that we are all aware and able to communicate in turn to our residents about what is happening. We can't accept another fire every 2 months and repeated exposure of our residents to the consequences. Those residents demand action, and rightly so. The council must play its part, and therefore I urge you to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm assuming that Louise Peace wants to second the motion.
Yes, please. Happy to second and reserve my right to speak.
Okay, Councillor Winstanley. So we move into the debate.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, thank you to Councillors Claydon and Peace for bringing this motion and expressing your concerns so thoughtfully. The fires are shocking. The frequency is obviously unacceptable. We've had enough. We've also had enough of the HGVs linked to the sites. It's very much appreciated that councillors from neighbouring wards are also engaged and care so deeply about this, which is clear from the motion. I wanted to reassure you that since the first of these most recent fires, which was December 23, correspondence with the key regulatory agencies is active and ongoing. While some of the action has been covered in the press that you mentioned, it may not always be immediately visible to all, but rest assured there are ongoing efforts in place to tackle the very concerns you've mentioned. We're also in correspondence with concerned residents who live in the immediate vicinity of the sites and live on or very close to the roads which are blighted by the trucks related to the sites. In Beaton Ward, efforts are spearheaded by Ian Albert, I think it's fair to say, in his role as Beaton councillor and Herts County councillor for Hitchin North. He's in regular contact with the Environment Agency, Herts County Council, other interested stakeholder parties, constantly calling for action. Councillor Daniel Allen has written to the Environment Agency to ask for air quality monitoring. Alistair Strathern, MP for Hitchin, has also written to the Environment Agency asking for air quality monitoring. Our Managing Director, Anthony Roach, has been involved in terms of fact finding in relation to permits. So he's put in time and effort as well. We obviously all signed the open letter, which was in the press not that long ago. In response to the element regarding the water and the pollution to the river, we have been assured by the Environment Agency that no water entered the river. There are storage tanks on the site which are enormous and can hold, I don't have the exact figure, but it might even be millions of litres. It's huge. It's huge. That water is siloed in these holding tanks. It's tested, and it met the standard that Anglian Water stipulate before it enters there. It doesn't enter it enters the foul system, which it had been tested, and they had assessed that it was of a suitable level. We've been assured that none has entered the river. All that said, your motion does bring very valuable points to light. And in response to those points, I'm absolutely happy to write to the Environment Agency in my capacity as the Executive Member for Environmental Health, and absolutely more than happy to report back within 6 months, to report back as where we're up to. So thank you again for your proactive approach and your continued engagement in this important matter. Thank you.
Councillor Daniel Allen.
Thank you very much. That's the effect I have. Anthony Roche has been working very closely with the Environment Agency. Alistair Strathern has called 2 meetings of agencies about this, and there's a public meeting scheduled for January. On the 15th of November, Alistair Strathern and I sent a letter to the East Anglia managers of the Environment Agency, Sadia Mahmood and Graham Verrier. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you because you don't need to hear it, trust me. The urgent request for air quality monitoring was the main point, and I can share it with you later, but I will quote 2 paragraphs. Residents and local businesses affected by the repeated fires are understandably anxious. As the primary regulator for this metal recycling facility under the environmental permitting regulations, we were deeply worried by the decision not to conduct air quality monitoring while the fires were ongoing or after they were extinguished, despite requests to do so. What I will point out is one of these sites does have air quality monitoring. We are therefore urging the Environment Agency to take immediate steps to establish regular and transparent air quality monitoring at and around the Wallace Way site. Such monitoring would not only help assess the potential risks, but would also reassure residents that their health and safety are being taken seriously. So we are working on this already. And I'd also like to point out that tomorrow I have a Hitchin Fires stakeholder meeting, which is being run by Alistair Strathern, who is taking steps in this and is leading the way on it. At that meeting, there will be the Hertfordshire County Council representatives of a Deputy Chief Executive and Executive Director of Resources, a Director of Growth and Place, Senior Group Manager Network Operations, Directors of Public Health, Directors of Regulatory Service and Community Safety. North Herts Council will have our Chief Executive, we'll have our Director and Leader of the Council, and we will have the Service Director for Housing and Environmental Health, and myself. County Councillor Ian Albert will also be in attendance, as will representatives from the Environment Agency and the Environment Waste Management. So we are working on this, and I will happily support you in this motion, vote for it, and do what is asked. Thank you.
Councillor Bryant.
Thank you. Thank you. Much of what I was going to say has already been said by Councillor Winstanley and Councillor Allen. This area of Bearton that we're talking about, Grove Road, Berrymead, Cadwell Lane, Wilbury Way, has residents who are already concerned because they live with lorries thundering past 12 hours a day. They live with air pollution from the waste transfer station on Berrymead Road and from the water treatment plant. And they have 2 recycling plants in their area. We've had 5 fires in the last year. We have actually supported our residents who we knew well already from these other things that were already happening around them, same residents, 5 times. These fires are happening so regularly that it was only 9 days between the review of the 4th fire and the 5th fire actually taking place. We are on the case. All I can add is that next week we have got a visit to one of the sites, Global Arda, and also in January we've got a meeting with Alice Strather, the councillors, with the residents and with the Environmental Agency and the County Council there. We're on it. Thank you.
Councillor Sam Collins.
Thank you, Chair. I've been a councillor here since 2018, and I remember the first week I got elected, first couple of weeks, cows invaded Hitchin train station twice. The trains all stopped working, so nobody's bins got collected, and these sites caught fire twice, and my inbox was full. I thought, is it always like this? The cows haven't returned to the train station, the trains still don't work, the bins mostly get collected, but the fires are still ongoing. This is not a new problem, and I'm really heartened to hear what Councillor Winstanley said, saying we've had enough, because it's not just the fires, it's the toxic clouds that they kick out, which can blow in any direction. This most recent fire, it blew right across the Priory School as the children were arriving for school. We don't know what was in that cloud. We don't know what toxins our children were exposed to. Now, if the wind had changed, it could have blown across Highbury and Priory wards. It depends on the wind direction, but this affects not just Hitchin, it could go blow into Letchworth. There's a real worry about that. Ickleford as well is, I mean, Councillor Peace, I think, is going to speak after me, so I won't go into that too far, but there is a real issue here, and it's not just air quality in the immediate area of the site, it's air quality across the entire town and the wider area, because there is a real risk to these fires. And the other point that I think needs to be reinforced are the HGVs that rumble through towns, many of them ignoring the weight limits through Hitchin Highbury ward. I think the time has come. When you say we've had enough, I think the time has come to really reinforce that point. These sites are no longer appropriate for Hitchin, and I fully support this motion, and I think we need to see these sites finally depart our town. Thank you.
Councillor Albert. Sorry. Yes.
Sorry, Chair, point of order. I agree with you, Sam, but I just want to say there is no evidence it's toxic whatsoever. And I'd like to point out that's quite alarmist and possibly unhelpful.
Chair.
There's plenty of evidence that it's toxic. You set fire to scrap, it's toxic. You don't need to be an advanced scientist to work that one out.
Councillor Albert.
Well, thanks, Chair. And let's see if we can get back to a rather more balanced note. And I think what was important recently, and because I support this motion, and I thank John and Louise for the motion, it's really important, and thank you for bringing us to it. What was important, I think, was the cross-party letter that a colleague, Councillor Mason, organised, but was signed by all of the Hitchin councillors and Councillor Peace from Ickleford. And I think that actually shows and demonstrate, I think, the best of politics in action, us working cross-party for the benefit of the town and our communities. And that's certainly something I would encourage, and we will want to do more of with John and Louise and other colleagues of all parties, not just Labour and Liberal Democrats. In supporting the motion, I take John's point about the recent inspection of Herts Fire and Rescue, but let me say, when I talk to our firefighters on the ground, yes, there may be some issues organisationally that they need and the senior management there, but the fantastic job our firefighters did for nearly 24 hours, and as I spoke to them, and I know other colleagues here did, over 24 hours of working to put out a dangerous fire in difficult circumstances, and not just the first, as colleagues have said. And I really thank them, and I know all of councillors here do. We, as Councillor Winstanley said, at the moment, there are just too many fires, too many lorries, too many risks to our environment, and what is also important here, not enough transparency of information and data to residents, and I think that's clearly something we need to take forward. As Councillor Winstanley said, that obviously we can provide some recent assurance about the water testing and the way that the lack of pollution into the rivers, but equally in doing those tests, the Environment Agency need to publish those tests, and so residents can know that actually that their water and their environment is safe. That transparency again. The importance of air quality monitoring that I think obviously Councillor Winstanley, Councillor Collins and other colleagues have mentioned. We need to do that regular testing, and it was, anecdotally, I did hear the other day, about the potential withdrawal of some of our other air quality monitoring stations in Hitchin, so which I know that Councillor Collins and I have discussed about previously, and it's something we probably need to come back to with the district and the county council. I think one of the things that we should rightly say here is that we do need that testing, as I just mentioned about now, and I've been pressing for that, the consistent monitoring, not just when there's a fire. We have got a range of material that we've received today in advance of the meeting. We've got the range of licenses. And I think it's quite interesting within the licenses that we've got a company that I certainly hadn't appreciated before until yesterday that actually took over only just in January because the previous company had gone bust and they bought it out of administration. But one of the regulatory challenges here is that, first of all, lithium-ion batteries are dangerous. But also the other thing is that actually what we found when we've talked to the Environment Agency is they don't regard at the moment under their regulations that a fire caused by a lithium battery is necessary in and of itself a sufficient material breach for their license to be withdrawn. They have to deal in material breaches. This is something we need to look at. We certainly will be arguing for our MPs to look at. It's clearly that regulatory action is weak and the fines are weak. But the other area I'll just touch on briefly, Chair, is around what's Herts County Council need to do, because Herts County Council are the planning authority for this. They are the ones that set the terms and conditions. One of the things there is that really since 2012, when there was a court case, they seem to have run scared in taking planning enforcement action. That's something we'll be raising with them, not part of this motion, but it is a really important part of the future action. We've got a public meeting on the 9th of January. I certainly commit, I'm sure the council colleagues will, to actually make sure that the information we provide from the meeting tomorrow and other meetings coming up is circulated to councillors, residents, and that we can then actually gain that kind of transparency that we miss. Please support this motion. Please support the work that has been done. And thanks, John and Louise, for bringing it to us.
Councillor Peace.
Thank you, Chair, and I'd like to thank members on the front bench for outlining all the action they've taken and for all their hard work on this issue. So in the early hours of the 8th of November, residents in Ickleford were woken by the sound of explosions, which were the result of a large fire at the Hitchin Industrial Estate. This, the latest in a series of fires, the Environment Agency confirmed to me, was the result of a self-combusting lithium battery within a waste pile. Hertfordshire Fire and Rescue Service shared advice via social media that local residents should close their doors and windows. But as the morning rush approached, staying away from the plume of black smoke that drifted across North Hitchin and Ickleford was not possible for those making their way to work, or for the many children travelling to primary and secondary schools in the area by foot or by cycling. The fact that the smoke was black strongly suggests that it contained carbon particulate matter. And we do know that these air polluting particles at a size of 2.5 microns have been linked to a number of health impacts. So much so that the Air Quality Standards Regulations 2010 sets tolerances for these particles. However, as other members have alluded to, we don't know for certain what was in the smoke because the Environment Agency has not tested residues from the fires. I'm pleased to hear that the Environment Agency are working to address residents' concerns. However, these incidents can no longer be considered as, in their words to me, the unfortunate result of a wider and ever-increasing industry problem relating to lithium batteries in the waste stream. The particles in the smoke not only caused air pollution, but also fell onto the surrounding areas, onto the fields and into the chalk streams. Given the frequency of these fires, the time has come to carry out monitoring of this pollution, both in terms of the amount and the content. We need more support to ensure that the people of North Herts get the scrutiny of metal waste processing on the Hitchin Industrial Estate that they deserve. Urgent action is required to stop these fires and any pollution of the environment. Thank you.
Councillor Barnard.
Thank you, Chair. I'm also the county councillor, which covers Ickleford, Westmill, Orton and beyond. For Ian, I'd like to perhaps reassure him that at the Public Health and Community Safety Cabinet Committee at Hertfordshire, within the last couple of weeks, the Chief Fire Officer did report that they were addressing the situation and progressing from there. But I'm dismayed that the health and well-being of our residents, and of course the residents in Hitchin overall, severely challenged by the continual pollution caused by these fires. Review of the licence will not only safeguard residents from airborne challenges, but as an additional bonus, grossly inappropriate HGV movements through Hitchin, the town centre and Grove Road areas included, primarily, I suppose. I fully support this motion. I will be pressing at county for action against the site. I just would like to say, please, everybody, and I'm sure that there will be a unanimous support for this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Munter.
Thank you, Chair. And can I just take the opportunity, first of all, to thank Councillor Peace and Councillor Claydon for bringing forward this motion to Council tonight, and in particular to Councillor Claydon for sharing his experiences and his family's experiences on the day that this fifth fire took place within 12 months. And what that brings to mind is very much the human cost of these fires, the anxiety, the distress, the disruption caused by these fires to people's everyday lives. And it's vital, crucial, that action is taken to protect the health and well-being of the people of Hitchin and the people of North Hertfordshire on a more wider basis. Because 5 fires in less than 12 months is completely and utterly unacceptable. The business involved evidently didn't learn the lessons in December 2023. They didn't learn the lessons in February of this year. They didn't learn the lessons in July or September of this year. It is bordering on negligent, if not negligent. It is time that the business of which is involved in this changes its policies and regulations of which it operates under to prevent something like this from happening again. And if it isn't prepared to do that, then authorities such as the Environment Agency, such as this council, such as Hertfordshire County Council, needs to step in order to prevent this from happening again. But also there's an economic cost. There's an economic cost caused.
And I thank Councillor Munster for his words, but it's probably worth reminding him just to know that there are 2 businesses here, not just one. And there's been 2 businesses that have had fires. So it is important. You can't say it's actually a plural. There are 2 organisations involved, not just one.
Point of information.
Yeah.
Well, I very much appreciate that, Councillor Albert, and indeed, all of the points of which I have just stated remain applicable to the fact that there are 2 businesses there. But it's not just about the human cost, it's also about the economic costs we're talking about, because we're talking about disruption caused to local businesses from people not feeling confident or comfortable enough to exit their own homes. It's also the cost to the county council for the extensive fire and rescue response which the county council has provided in order to make this site safe and to prevent it from continuing to combust. And I just want to take the opportunity to thank the firefighters from Hertfordshire Fire and Rescue for everything that they've done. And I'm very pleased to hear that we're working on a multi-agency level in order to actually prevent something like this from happening again. And what I would say is that it's vital that we continue that work, but that work results in action. We cannot have talk. It needs to result in action. And Councillor Albert and a number of other colleagues have raised very important points surrounding communications and transparency with residents. That is incredibly vital. It's vital in order to rebuild their confidence and their trust to go about their day-to-day lives without being impacted by this fire and the subsequent consequences of it. And just to end and to finish, whether it be North Hertfordshire District Council or Hertfordshire County Council, I would argue that a review of the licence for these businesses ought to take place, and that the revocation of that licence should be at the forefront of the minds of officers to ensure that such fires do not happen again and that we don't see one as we move into 2025.
If I may just clarify, I believe the permit you're referring to is their operating licence that is granted by the Environment Agency. Therefore, it is not within the gift of either the County Council or the District Council to review that or revoke it.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. And it's great to hear such cross-party agreement in what's clearly very, very important. As an ex-officer with Hertfordshire Constabulary of 30 years now post-retirement, I'm dismayed to hear that these HGVs are contravening the weight limits going through Hitchin town centre. I'll undertake now to contact tomorrow the hierarchy from the road policing department to flag up to them that this has been raised, because there's some quite simple enforcement action that can take place in addition to all the other good stuff cross agency that's going to take place too. Thank you.
Councillor Mason.
I'll be very brief. I just wanted to pick up on something that Ralph said. I think it's important we recognise that the emergency services and council workers, we talk about the human cost. They have to go into these sites afterwards, and I'm particularly thinking of the firefighters who, every time one of these fires happen, they have to go in there and they are effectively putting their safety on the line, because you don't know what's in there and you don't know what's going to explode. And I just think we should place on record our huge thanks for all the emergency services who respond, but particularly the firefighters.
Okay, there's no more people wanting to speak. So can we go to the vote?
Chair, that motion's carried.
Okay, so now we have the A1M junction 6 to junction 8 upgrade motion. Can I invite Councillor Ralph Muntzer to move the motion?
Thank you, Chair. And I think it's rather fitting that this motion comes before Council when we have discussed the Great Ashby and NS1 strategic sites, because those sites equate to around 2,000 new homes. Now, if one were to take that figure and double it based on two households having two vehicles, forgive me, then that will increase traffic in this area by 4,000 vehicles. Now, as members know, this council adopted the local plan in November of 2022. Under that local plan, nearly 13,000 new homes will be built in North Hertfordshire. And that figure doesn't take into account the development of which will be ongoing in surrounding districts such as Stevenage and indeed Welwyn Hatfield and Central Bedfordshire as well. And something which unites all of those districts is the fact that the A1M is a key artery which runs through them. Now, as members I'm sure will have been aware from reading this motion or indeed their own historical knowledge, in 2014, the government announced that they would be upgrading the A1M between Junction 6 at Welwyn to Junction 8 in Hitchin and Stevenage. This would increase the capacity on this incredibly busy and congested stretch of road by 50%, therefore resulting in less delays and less congestion for drivers who use the motorway, but also as well less pressure on roads such as those in Codicott, such as those in Nebworth, and including the A602 in Hitchin as well. Now, unfortunately, for a plethora of reasons, that scheme was subsequently delayed and unfortunately cancelled in April of last year. But the fact is we have a new government now, and this new government is very much, it says, focused on driving growth. And what better to spur economic growth in Hertfordshire than a multi-million-pound investment in our infrastructure? Because we often talk a lot here about infrastructure first and mitigating the negative impacts of development. And I'm sure all of us have sat on a road in the morning when we go to work, when we go and take the kids to school, and we're stuck in traffic. This will undoubtedly help to reduce that congestion. It will help to reduce those delays, and it will also help to ensure that the communities, particularly in the south of the district, in Codicott, in Nebworth, for example, are going to be alleviated from the additional pressures of which is going to be felt by additional development. I sincerely hope that this motion is able to gain cross-party support, because it is all about ensuring that actually planning is on a sustainable footing for the future, and that we are indeed planning for the future and delivering those infrastructure upgrades to cope with the additional pressures and demands of development. So I'm very happy to propose this motion and look forward to hearing what colleagues have to say.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Patmore.
Yes, I a second.
So I believe that Councillor Ward wishes to propose an amendment.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Firstly, thank you to Councillor Munter for raising this key issue impacting the residents of my ward and others. I propose the amendment to reflect the specific impact not only on the A602, but also the key local roads running parallel to the A1M, namely the B197 through Nebworth and the B656 through Codicot. The county's local transport plan on page 96 was expecting traffic reductions on these routes to be enabled by the A1M capacity improvements, which have not been delivered. Our own district's local plan has also multiple new housing sites at locations adjacent to these B roads, further increasing their use despite active travel increases as well. Without the A1M capacity improvements or other solutions, we will just exacerbate the existing traffic chaos our residents get stuck in regularly when the A1M is too busy or has restrictions. It also hinders the adoption of active travel options for local journeys, with residential streets and B roads clogged up with through traffic. The dithering and failure of central government and highways to implement this over the last decade is not delivering a fair deal for our district's residents. Therefore, I propose the amendment to the motion on item 7C. The additional text is in red and has been published in the supplementary documents, page 3 by committee services. Thank you.
Is there a seconder to the amendment?
Happy to second, Chair, and reserve the right to speak.
Okay, so can we debate the amendment, please? Councillor Munter.
Thank you, Chair. And in the interest of brevity, I just want to put on record my thanks to Councillor Ward and Councillor Barnes for their support in this motion, and I'd be very happy to accept that amendment without the need to go to a vote if that's in order.
If you're happy to accept that, then that's fine. So we are debating the substantive motion.
The amended motion.
The amended motion, sorry. Councillor Barnard.
Thank you, Chair. I'm warmed by the comments from my colleague, Councillor Albert, that important projects should be supported cross-party, and we've demonstrated that on the last one. Without political point scoring and finger pointing. I welcome and support the suggested paragraph 3 in lovely red type. But do we really have to have this? I mean, how long is this going to go on? By the previous Conservative government, by the Conservative. Come on, let's work together. Let's yes, we want to see this go through, but we for God's sake, come on.
Councillor Alistair Willoughby.
Thank you, Chair. I absolutely understand the impetus of this motion and the accompanying amendment, but I think there's a need for this to be taken up by our county council colleagues, actually, as there is clearly a much larger strategic view of this particular piece of infrastructure. It has been said that the more roads, the more lanes. This was certainly what our former MP, Oliver Hild, told us at the 2019 general election in Hustings and Baldock, as I recall, when speaking about surveys for this stretch of the A1, among others. I don't know if that is truly accurate for this specific issue, but I think this is something that our county council colleagues could consider, but I don't think it belongs here, as Councillor Barnard rightly says, as a piece of political point scoring.
Councillor, what?
Yes, I think you'll probably find that the A1M is a major national trunk road and therefore is not under the control of the county council, but in fact is national. But thank you for the point.
Councillor Allen.
So the RAC campaigns to make sure that all motorways have a hard shoulder. And I'm interested in how Councillor Munsah's proposal intends to make this work by removing a couple of small hedges, maybe? A smart motorway, perhaps? Smart motorway schemes were brought in by the Conservatives. They were a dangerous idea. You break down the motorway without a hard shoulder, you are 3 times more likely to be killed or seriously injured. But we are now in a strange situation as motorists because the Conservatives miraculously listened to reason and cancelled all planned smart motorways. At the beginning of this meeting, Councillor Billing reiterated the Council's declaration of a climate and ecological emergency. How can we vote for this in good conscience?
Councillor Ian Mantle.
Thank you. Obviously, Councillor Munsah hasn't heard that traffic expands to fill roads made available for it. And also, could he please confirm why this amount of money spent on improving the atrocious train service we have in North Herts would not be a much better value for money than just stacking up a little bit more road for people, more people to drive on?
Okay, there doesn't seem to be any further requests to speak. Yes. Councillor Munsah, you have a right to reply.
Very much, Chair. I will just address a number of the points of which have been raised. To start off with, by the point raised by Councillor Willoughby, I agree. The County Council does need to take this on, but indeed it starts the process and it shows that this council is in support of an infrastructure project that will have a significant benefit to the residents of North Hertfordshire. If that is not what we're here to do, then I don't know why we're here in the first place. Can I just then start by addressing the point raised by Councillor Mantle? Indeed, yes, we need to improve the reliability of our train service. Unfortunately, that is not something of which is within the gift of this council. And indeed, I believe the Labour government is going to be nationalising all the railways in order to try and deliver better reliability. And that's yet to be seen. And then if I may just touch upon the point of which Councillor Allen raises, because it is indeed a serious point, and it's one that I take incredibly seriously because every death on our roads is in fact a tragedy. That is why originally the smart motorway rollout was stopped in April of 2023 to allow a stock take to take place. Now, as I'm sure Councillor Allen is aware, 3 rounds of that stock take has indeed now taken place. And the overwhelming conclusion of national highways is that roads in England are some of the safest in Europe. Motorways are statistically the safest roads in the country, and indeed smart motorways, where there are the appropriate safety measures in place, are safer than conventional motorways. Now, what I would argue is that in order to address and alleviate the concerns of drivers and reduce the risk of death or serious injury on our roads, the government needs to ensure that if it does resurrect this scheme, it has emergency refuge areas at 0.75 kilometres at intervals in order to ensure that drivers are never more than 0.75 kilometres from an emergency refuge area. And of course, that the technology such as radar stopped vehicle detection is in fact installed to identify stopped vehicles in live lanes and for those lanes then to be closed and the relevant assistance to be rendered to them. Smart motorways can indeed be made safe, that it has been shown that they are safe, and ultimately, unfortunately, in this instance, it is the only way that we are going to increase capacity of the A1M between junctions 6 and 8.
Thank you. I was going to move on to the vote, but Councillor Barnes.
Just a point of order, Chair. Councillor Claydon wasn't offered a right of reply to his motion on the previous item and should have been.
No, I only was just a.
Sorry?
I only was just made aware of that I should have
Okay,
done.
I think he should be afforded the opportunity if at an appropriate point if possible.
Not because we've had the vote.
Okay.
Okay, so we're moving to the vote.
Chair, that motion's carried.
Okay, that brings the proceedings to an end. The next meeting is the 9th of December.